The protagonist of this manhwa is one of the most ordinary-looking people you'll ever see, and he works at a logistics center to make a living. Kim Jong-yum kinda hates his job, and you'll soon find out why. When he tries to strike up a casual chat with the robot next to him, the tin can just ignores him and gets straight to work. And that's exactly why he dislikes being here. You see, the entire logistics center is filled with technologically advanced AI robots that handle most of the manual labor. Jong-yum is the one overseeing everything, but there's not a single person to talk to. He sometimes feels pretty down, missing the warmth of human interaction, and occasionally wonders if he's ended up in the wrong place. This all started about 2 months ago, right after he was discharged from the military, and that's when his streak of bad luck began. The first major setback was that his parents moved to Uijeongbu. As a consolation gift for his discharge, they paid the deposit and 6 months' rent for his studio apartment, leaving him to live alone near his old school. Thus began his forced solitary life. Although he was financially stable thanks to government support and the rent coverage from his parents, he decided to take his time looking for a job. With no rush, he hoped to find the best opportunity. But things didn't go as planned, and he faced rejection after rejection before even getting the chance to prove himself. After a month of job hunting, he was going stir-crazy from extreme boredom. One day, while killing time, he ended up venting to his sister about their pathetic brother who couldn't even land a job. Naturally, his sister had a field day trolling him, and during their chat, he heard about delivery companies using AI robots to make work easier, and a lot of people were working as operators in these companies. His interest was piqued, and that's how he ended up in this dump of a place where there's literally no one to talk to. Just as I'm saying this, we hear another person calling out to him. This man looks quite grumpy and unpleasant at first glance. It wouldn't be surprising if he were the manager, as he fits the role perfectly. Anyway, the senior informs his junior that they're out of tuna stock, even though the system still says there's some left. He tells our boy to check the warehouse for any missing stock. Of course, Jong-yum complies with a fake smile plastered on his face. Let's be honest, Jong-yum finds those robots way more warmer than his cold-as-shit senior. Anyway, once Kim heads into the warehouse, the door behind him starts to close. He quickly begins searching for the tuna his senior mentioned. After rummaging around, he spots the stock, climbs up a riser, and grabs it. Just then, he hears a loud thud of the door to the warehouse slamming shut. He tries turning the doorknob, but it's stuck. He calls his manager Shin, but there's no answer. The thought of calling 911 crosses his mind, but he decides against it, because he's not stuck in a freezing freezer, so it wouldn't be worth the hassle. Instead, he takes a selfie and sends it to his sisters, letting them know he's trapped in the warehouse. At first, she teases him about his situation, but then she suddenly says she just heard a building collapsing outside her house. Of course, the brother gets worried about his sister and quickly calls her phone number. When she picks up, she doesn't say anything, and he wonders if she's just pulling a prank. But just as he's thinking that, the entire warehouse starts to shake, and the emergency alarm blares. The place descends into chaos, and he hears announcements telling everyone to evacuate quickly. Stuck in the warehouse with no idea what's happening outside, he starts banging on the main door with his empty fists, but his frantic pounding gets no response. Desperate, he decides to call 911, only to find that the cellular signal is down. He's seriously losing his mind now, and the thought that there might be a full-blown war going on outside is freaking him out. Suddenly, he notices something pounding on the main gate from the outside, each impact leaving a giant dent in the massive steel door as if it were nothing but a cardboard cutout. His hands tremble as he pulls it back from the doorknob, instinctively knowing that shit is going haywire outside, and if he makes a single sound, he's certain he's done for. Sweating profusely, he collapses to his knees, and thankfully, the pounding on the gate eventually stops. However, the commotion and screams outside are still loud enough to terrify him. 3 days pass since that unfortunate day, and he's still stuck inside the warehouse, surviving on the available food. Since no one has come looking for him, he's convinced that something major must have happened outside. He wonders if there's a war going on, and by now, he's almost relieved to be stuck in here, thinking he might have been a goner if he had been outside. The alarm that used to blare constantly has been silent since yesterday, which is a relief. At least he can sleep now. But he's unsure how much longer he can hold out, especially with his battery running low, and this might be his last note to the outside world. He's praying that a soldier or someone from his country finds him soon and keeps the family safe. Just when he thought things couldn't get crazier, a system window pops up in front of him, telling him he's been chosen, and to check his awakened abilities. At first, Jong-yum thinks he might be hallucinating, but then another window appears, saying he has acquired his own personal subspace for storing objects. He starts to wonder if there was some kind of cocaine in the tuna cans he's been eating for the past 3 days. Another digital notification pops up, saying that the target has been designated and asking if he wants to store it. Without hesitation, he confirms, and suddenly he begins to fall, landing hard on his butt on solid ground outside. He scrambles to his feet and looks around, only to see rubble and debris everywhere, and everything is in total destruction. He spots his senior lying dead on the ground. While the system windows keep on flashing, our boy is busy puking his guts out after seeing his senior's lifeless body. The system then states that a suitable operating system for him has been found, and it's currently being installed. Suddenly he hears footsteps approaching from behind, and there is a huge shadow cast by a figure behind him, and he is pretty darn sure that this shadow is not of a human. As the camera pans out, we see an orc-like monster with sharp fangs and a giant blood-soaked body. Jongyum sweats profusely as he tries to calm himself, desperately hoping his fears aren't true. He tries to stay optimistic, convincing himself that the loud roar he heard 3 days back might be from a gorilla or a bear. But he doesn't dare look back at the thing behind him, and instead bolts as fast as he can, running for his life. His panic reaches new heights as he realizes there's a literal monster hunting him down. He runs frantically, even stepping on someone's innards in this wild dash. He has no idea why there's an orc-like creature here, or why it's so determined to catch him. But he knows one thing for sure. If he doesn't escape soon, he's going to get caught. Suddenly, the system window pops up, announcing that synchronization is complete and asking if he would like to enter the subspace. With no hesitation, Jongyum quickly says yes. After all, the monster is almost upon him. Just as the creature's hand swings at him, he jumps into the portal. While he is finally safe on the other side of the portal, the monster is stuck on the other side of the portal, and could do nothing other than groan in frustration. Jongyum gets confused and wonders why the monster can't enter this place. A hovering drone confirms that nothing can enter his subspace without his permission, because he is the master of it. The drone explains that the subspace is entirely under his control. Jongyum is stunned to see the drone talking to him, and he has a strange sense of déjà vu. When he looks around, he finds himself back in the PAX's fulfillment center warehouse, but this time it's part of his new subspace. The entire place is filled with the same robots as before. The system announces that, since he's entered the subspace for the first time, he'll receive a reward for completing the tutorial, which is a 1-mana stone. The stone materializes in his hand, but before he can figure out what it is, the monster outside starts slamming against the portal. The noise startles him, and he almost forgets that he was being chased by a literal monster. He panics once again, and frantically asks the system if he's really sure the monsters can't get inside. The system confirms that nothing can enter the subspace without his permission. The system window flashes once again, stating that the PAX Fulfillment Center is a 5-story building with a total floor area of 10,000 pyong, approximately 33,000 square meters. It holds every product needed to improve the lives of customers. The current shipping speed is 60 kilometers per hour, and it can handle 1 shipment at a time with a shipping size limit of 2 meters. Jongyum is just as clueless as all of us about what this information even entails. The system then further confuses him by revealing that there are only 2 minutes left until maintenance. Confused, Jongyum asks if the logistics center will shut down after 2 minutes. The drone confirms this and explains that he can use the Mana Stone in order to supply energy and maintain the facilities in the subspace. Since he currently has 1 Mana Stone, it can power the entire facility for the next 24 hours. Jongyum is amazed by the efficiency of the Mana Stone, and the drone promptly explains that when the PAX Fulfillment Center was stored in the subspace, the energy supply system was modified to fit the subspace environment. Therefore, the facility runs on Mana Stones. Jongyum asks if all this is even possible or if it's just some sci-fi bullshit. Suddenly, the lights in the facility go out, and the drone starts flashing lights. The PAX system explains that the energy supply to the facility has been cut off, and if the energy isn't restored, PAX Fresh and other products could start to rot. Apparently, PAX Fresh is one of the services that ensures the storage and delivery of everything from fresh vegetables to meat and prepared meals in frozen and refrigerated conditions. Jongyum looks back at the monster glaring at him and realizes that outside is practically a war zone. In such a situation, food is crucial for survival. With the power to the freezers and refrigerators cut off, it's a huge problem. He asks the drone if the Mana Stone is really a substitute for electricity. The drone confirms this, so Jongyum asks how he can obtain more Mana Stones. The drone replies that he can acquire Mana Stones from beings of another world. Well, it's clear that our boy is not exactly thrilled to go against this muscle-bound monster who can literally rip him apart in one fell swoop. He tells his drone to use the Mana Stone for now, and he promptly heads into the facility to grab some weapons. Once inside, he gathers a handful of weapons, and the system window flashes the price for each weapon. With the limited supplies he has, he's concerned about running out of stock if he directly throws them at the monster. He is also not sure whether these blades can even penetrate the monster's thick skin. He decides that wounding and killing the monster slowly might be a better approach. Since the monster can't enter his subspace, he doesn't need to take it down in one go. Instead, he'll work on injuring it gradually, making sure not to waste his resources or risk running out of weapons too soon. Jongyum throws the axe at the monster, but it only grazes the monster's body, which only further aggravates its rage. With his initial plan not working as hoped, and realizing he doesn't have many weapons left, he decides to try throwing the heavy axe once more, hoping it will make a more significant impact. He asks the pack system how much stock is left for the axe, and he is surprised to find out there are 15 remaining. He was expecting only a few, so this number catches him off guard. He quickly inquires about the location of these axes. Once Jongyum reaches the storage area, he is shocked to find out that these axes are duplicating infinity. The pack system explains that these items are created using a process that allows them to be duplicated indefinitely. While they can be damaged or altered, they cannot be depleted. This revelation shocks Jongyum, because if what the system is saying is true, then he has access to an infinite stock of weapons. Surprisingly, the pack system confirms this. With this newly discovered knowledge, Jongyum is relieved that he no longer needs to worry about running out of weapons. He can freely throw them at the monster without concern for depleting his stock. He is sure that his shoulders might give out before the monster does, but at least he has a seemingly endless supply of weapons. The system then shares an interesting tidbit. Apparently, our boy doesn't have to throw the weapons manually, because he can automatically ship products from the subspace to the outside world. The system explains that shipping is only possible every 30 seconds, but it can be sped up by improving the skills. Jongyum quickly asks how to throw his weapons, and the system says all he has to do is think about the registered product and say ship for it to be automatically sent. Right as the system explains this, Jongyum promptly says the word ship, and an axe flies through the air at incredible speed and smashes into the monster's disgusting face, taking it down effortlessly. The axe was thrown by the drone, and when Jongyum asks about the throw speed, the system replies that the default shipping speed is 60 kilometers per hour. Now it makes sense to Jongyum what the system meant by shipping speed before. The system then reveals that if he wants to change the speed, he can adjust it up to a maximum of 75 km/h. To go beyond that, he'll need to enhance his skills. Naturally, Jongyum asks the system how to enhance his skills, and the system explains that he can do so using mana stones. Speaking of mana stones, our boy quickly remembers the monster he just defeated, and he realizes he'll need to fight more of these creatures to advance. He quickly grabs some gear from the facility. The first thing he grabs is lightweight combat boots costing around 50,000 KRW and matching tactical combat pants for about 78,000 KRW. Once he's equipped, he also buys a detailed map of the Seoul metropolitan area and a permanent marker. He draws a circle around the Gwangjin district and then marks the neighboring districts as well in a certain order. With his plan in place, he decides to start with the nearest marked district and work his way towards his final destination, Ijeongbu, where he hopes to reach his parents. Since Jongyum is starting from Gunpo, and he does not even have a car, he realizes it's going to be a long journey to reach his parents. Although it's not as fast as a car or motorcycle, a regular bicycle is still pretty valuable in a post-apocalyptic world, and if I'm being honest, it's practically a Lamborghini at that moment. He hops onto the bike and starts pedaling through the desolate world. After about 30 minutes, night falls, and he's managed to take down almost 12 orcs during this short journey. He then reveals to us that he has learned one valuable thing after taking down 12 orcs. But before he could explain anything about his discovery, a monster suddenly appears and tries to attack him. Jongyum quickly retreats into his subspace, leaving the monster outside. While the monster is immobilized, he uses his shipment ability again to deliver the axe with incredible speed. Unfortunately, the axe misses its mark slightly and only injures the monster's shoulder. To use his shipment ability again, Jongyum has to wait 30 seconds for the cooldown, and there's also a range limit of 10 meters. Despite these downsides, he's learned that his skills are pretty amazing and can be improved by gathering mana stones and upgrading them. Besides shipment, Pax's ability has other applications, and we will figure out soon what that is. Suddenly, the monster notices movement behind him, and when he turns around, he sees the axe flying back into the portal, and then it comes back, hitting him in the face again, sealing his fate on the spot. This is actually the second application of Pax's shipment ability, which is also known as product retrieval. It automatically brings back dispatched items, which is just as convenient as the shipment ability. Jongyum uses his retrieval ability once more to get the mana stone from the monster. He is kind of curious why he can't simply retrieve the mana stone like this without killing the monster. He then asks Pax the same question, and learns that he can use his retrieve skill on the stone because it belongs to him only after he kills the monster. Nevertheless, Jongyum steps out of his subspace and reveals to us another piece of crucial information he had learned about this apocalyptic world. Apparently, the bizarre orcs aren't the only creatures ravaging the planet. There are also winged monsters, and he knows it's going to take a lot to hunt one of those down. Suddenly, he hears cries for help. But before he can figure out who is calling, the scene transitions to this man, who goes by the name Choi, desperately trying to run. He's so exhausted that each step seems heavier than the last, and a flying creature is trying to hunt him down. The monster swoops in, slamming the man from behind and sending him crashing to the ground in agony. There's another person behind the injured man, but before this another guy can help his friend up. The monster lands right in front of him and blocks his path. Its ferocious mouth is drooling, as if human flesh is the most delicious thing in this area. But strangely enough, the monster doesn't attack the man standing in front of it. Instead, it turns its gaze toward Choi, who is lying on the ground, groaning in pain. The man is bewildered to see that the monster isn't attacking him, and realizes that this creature was targeting Choi all along, likely because Choi is smaller and seems like an easier target. He has no clue what he can do against this giant monster to save his friend, because all he has is this little knife, and he is not sure if this knife can even be used to distract this monster. Just then, the ring of a bicycle bell echoes through the area, and not surprisingly, it's our boy speeding toward them, but these two have no idea who or what is coming their way. Before they can process what's happening, they watch in shock as the monster that was hunting them down is struck by a projectile, sending it sliding across the ground from the force of the blow. The monster was knocked down by a single throw of an axe, leaving both of the men struggling to process what they had just seen. Jongyum quickly checks if they are all right, but they are still in awe, their jaws hanging open as they try to grasp how someone on a bicycle managed to defeat a flying wyvern with just an axe. The two of them quickly ask Jongyum if he is a soldier, and they also begin bowing their heads in respect, grateful for saving their lives. Jongyum, glad that they are safe, answers their question by pointing to his uniform. He explains that he is an employee of PAX FC, and they can see he is wearing the company's uniform. This revelation shocks them even more. They had assumed he was a seasoned soldier given his impressive skills and appearance. Even if he wasn't a soldier, his abilities are so extraordinary that if they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they'd never have believed that someone could take down a wyvern with a simple axe throw while riding a bicycle. Jongyum is surprised to learn that these people are familiar with the concept of abilities. One of them quickly agrees, mentioning that he has an awakened ability himself, though it's just a modest driving ability. Given the circumstances, he hasn't had a proper chance to use it. The other person, Choi, begins to laugh and admits he feels a bit envious because he hasn't awakened any ability himself. Jongyum then asks if there are any other people around. Choi confirms that there are not, explaining that they are in Block C, which has a logistics center. A lot of people gathered here, but unfortunately, monsters did too. Most of the people were attacked, killed, or eaten alive. Only around 10 to 15 survivors are left, and they are relatively isolated in Block E's underground terminal. He further explains that they were looking for a road that vehicles could use, and they also wanted to gather some daily necessities, but suddenly they were attacked by the monster. The other person then suggests that instead of talking here, Jongyum should join them. He is welcome to come with them to their living quarters on the 4th floor of the basement. The monsters have never attacked that area, so they can sleep comfortably there. They also offer some light snacks. Jongyum considers the offer, and we can tell he is definitely interested in seeing the vehicles they mentioned earlier, and is in desperate need of information about functioning vehicles. Eventually, he decides to accept their invitation, even though he's unsure if he should fully trust them. As they begin to walk away, we take one last look at the dead monster lying on the ground. That is when our boy retrieves the mana stone from inside the monster and quickly tucks it into his subspace. He's glad that these two don't know about his ability, as it means he has a backup plan if things go wrong and can escape into subspace if necessary. A while later, they finally make it to the basement, where they see a man who appears to have just taken down an orc all by himself. Choi quickly runs over to his friend, asking what happened and if everything is all right. The orc killer reassures him that everything is fine, explaining that the orc must have wandered in by accident. Fortunately, it didn't see them, so they were able to take it out easily. No one is injured, but they can no longer be sure that the place is safe. On the other hand, Jongyum feels a bit terrified by how dangerous this place is, but he quickly snaps out of his thoughts when the orc killer asks about him. Choi explains that Jongyum is the one who saved them from the wyvern and used to work for PAX FC. He also mentions that Jongyum is quite strong, having killed the wyvern with a thrown axe from a distance. Everyone is amazed and curious about what kind of ability he might have. At that moment, a woman rushes toward him, and she is absolutely thrilled that he saved Youngsu and Byung-chul. She is so grateful that she begins doing a happy dance. The others start to gather around him, showering him with praise. Jongyum tries to downplay it, saying he was just doing what he had to do. Just as our lad is getting so much attention, Choi tries to disperse the crowd, telling them not to tease the young guy. Just then, the orc killer guy speaks up, saying that everyone here has been working together for over 10 years, and that Yong-soo and Byung-chul are like family to him. He's genuinely grateful to meet someone who saved his family, and introduces himself as Lee Jin-mok, the center manager of Daehyun Express Terminal. He even bows his head in respect for saving his two friends. Once the pleasantries are over, Jin-mok gives Jung-yum a brief rundown of the place. He explains that while they can't guarantee the safety of the location, it's much more comfortable than the outside world. They have food and water supplies from the logistics center, so Jung-yum can eat as much as he wants without feeling embarrassed and can make himself at home. Jin-mok also mentions that they have plenty of supplies and can get more from the logistics center if needed. However, Young-soo interrupts to point out that the logistics center they're talking about has suddenly disappeared. Of course, everyone is left wide-eyed and their mouths are hanging open at this absurd news. Mok Jin quickly asks what on earth this even means. Choi confirms it again, saying it's literally gone, and explains that this is why they were chased by the wyvern. The others in the group refuse to believe this and question how such a massive building could simply disappear. Mok Jin then finally comes to terms with the reality, and also tells his other friends that if the monsters roaming around can be real, then it's not too far-fetched to believe a building could vanish into nothingness. Meanwhile, Jung-yum stands silently, and I'm not quite sure if the disappearance of that logistics center has something to do with our boy's subspace. Anyway, the manager tries to keep everyone calm and tells them that no matter what, they need to dig through the tunnel. If they stay here, things will only get worse. He encourages everyone not to be discouraged, saying that their time has just come a little early and that they will start heading into the tunnel as soon as possible. The woman from before, fired up, tries to motivate the others by reminding them that, even without the logistics center, they still need to think about their next move. So she insists they must force their way through. Jung-yum turns to the manager, asking what force our way through actually means. The manager explains that everyone here has homes elsewhere, and vehicles are essential for travel. However, with the roads blocked, they need to find a way through. Jung-yum perks up at the mention of the vehicles and asks for more info. The manager confirms they do have working vehicles, but explains that all the roads are blocked. The golf course obstructs the way to the north, containers block the east, and the southern Yangdong Expressway is completely destroyed. The tunnel to the west is the only exit, but unfortunately, a group of wyverns has taken over that tunnel. Until now, everyone has been surviving by getting food and water from the logistics center, but now they have to force their way through. The manager tells Jung-yum that he doesn't have to go through the tunnel since the blocked roads are for vehicles, and there are ways to escape on foot or by bicycle. However, Jung-yum quickly responds that he needs a vehicle as well, and thinks it's best to go through the tunnel. The manager does not try to change our boy's mind any further, and simply says he's welcome to join them if he's up for it. Jung-yum smiles and says he'd be glad to work with them. Jung-yum also thinks in his mind that it would be better if he kept his abilities hidden. While the group seems nice enough, he can't ignore that they've been struggling to survive while he was safe in the center. They might have run out of food and supplies, and he's sure they won't be upfront about their situation. He understands their need for secrecy, and plans to stay cautious as well. He then turns to the manager and says he wants to check out the situation with the tunnel and the wyvern. He's planning to go scouting, but in reality, he just wants to use his abilities to demolish that horde of monsters to rack up some sweet mana stones. The scene then flashes back a little. After taking down a bunch of monsters, he saved up 5 magic stones. With these, he can cut the cooldown on his shipping ability down to 5 seconds. That's when he sees 3 new shipping abilities. The first one is Precise Delivery, which, as the name suggests, locks onto the target and guarantees a hit. The second is Simultaneous Delivery, which lets him ship up to 2 items at once. The third is Automatic Delivery, which allows him to automatically deliver designated items, with the timing interval being adjustable. As cool as these abilities sound, each one costs about 10 stones, and our guy is totally looking forward to see them in action, though he's still a bit unclear on what exactly Automatic Delivery does. In the present moment, he's grinning from ear to ear, thrilled that he saved up the magic stones, and looking forward to his scouting mission to earn some more, or so he thought. His dream of purchasing fantastic abilities is quickly dashed when he finds himself stuck with Young-soo, who was one of the guys he had saved earlier. When our boy asks him why he's tagging along, Young-soo says it's too dangerous to go outside alone, but Jung-yum reminds him that he was the one who was being chased by a wyvern. But Young-soo insists it doesn't matter because he can't let him go alone. Besides, he is confident our guy will save him again if needed. Our guy then remembers Young-soo mentioning he had awakened a driver's ability, so he asks him if he can see a message window or something like that. Young-soo says he hasn't seen any message window or anything like that, but he has a gut feeling that he has indeed awakened an ability, and it just hasn't fully matured yet. Well, this info isn't exactly reassuring to our boy, and he's starting to feel pretty worried. As night falls, their bike zooms down the road at insane speeds, Jong-yum is literally sweating in fear as he watches Young-so literally steer the bike with one leg while trying to balance on it. When he asks why Young-so is driving like this, the man responds that there are so many cars on the road, and it's hard to see. That's when Young-so spots a wyvern up ahead. Our guy quickly tells him to stop since he can't see a thing. It looks like the monster has finally caught up to their presence, and as it glares at them, Young-so asks what they should do. Just then, a projectile hits the monster, taking it down in one blow, leaving Young-so completely baffled. Meanwhile, our guy calmly tells him to keep his head straight and not look back. While he is saying that, he sneakily retrieves the mana stone and stores it in his subspace. Finally, Young-so points out that he can see the tunnel over there. He slams on the brakes, but before our boy can ask him why he stopped in the middle of the road, the reason behind their abrupt halt becomes clear when they see a ton of monsters crawling around the area, and Young-so is absolutely terrified, and I would not be surprised if he has sharted in his pants already. As one of the monsters starts to walk toward them, Young-so is pretty sure their game is over. Even with the electric bikes, there's no way they can outrun this many wyverns. Just as Young-so braces himself for the worst, our guy decides he has no choice but to use his subspace ability. He quickly calls up his system, dumps his mana stones to cut down the cooldown from 30 seconds to only 5 seconds. Young-so confusingly asks what the heck he's doing, but our guy doesn't bother to explain. Meanwhile, the monster lets out a deafening roar, and every monster in the vicinity starts closing in from all directions. Just in the nick of time, Jong-yum yells, "Ship!" and a projectile comes crashing down, taking out the monster and saving Young-so. He glances back, still anxious and panicked, and is left wide-eyed when he spots a portal behind them. After taking down the monster, our guy quickly grabs the stones from it and tells Young-so to stick close, because that's the only way he can keep him safe. Young-so agrees, though he's completely clueless about what's going on and why there's a logistics center behind them. Just then, more monsters show up, and one of them is quickly dealt with by our guy's axes. The more monsters get ready and quickly charge at them. Young-so panics and begins stepping back, and eventually dives into our boy's subspace. The monster, on the other hand, brutally slams into the subspace barrier, while Young-so stumbles back and falls down to the ground. The monster regains its composure and charges again, but our guy slips into his subspace just in time. The monster slams into the barrier once more and is soon taken down by an axe, dropping right away. Meanwhile, Young-so looks at this scene in awe, as if he has just witnessed a miracle. He can barely believe his eyes, and from the logistics center to the axes flying around, he's not sure what amazes him more. But he is sure of one thing, that for our boy, these monsters are nothing more than pests, and this tunnel is just an annoyance he can clear out without breaking a sweat. He then reflects on how everyone in the basement wanted to use the delivery vehicle to carry food and move relatively safely, and the tunnel is just a part of the route. Even if they get through safely, the monsters are still out there, but for our guy, it's different. He really just needs the vehicle as a means of transportation, since he can deal with anything with ease. Young-so has even started to feel a bit jealous as well, because with an ability like that, he could easily get to his family as soon as possible. He's not sure how far our boy plans to travel that he is feeling the need to use a vehicle. Suddenly, they notice the monsters starting to run away. Jong-yum is fascinated to see that these reptiles are pretty smart, because they're fleeing instead of charging into danger. As our guy is retrieving the stones, Young-so notices this blue stone hovering in the air and promptly asks what it is. Our boy curiously asks if he's never seen a mana stone before. Young-so admits he hasn't, so Jong-yum explains that he uses them to enhance his abilities. Young-so finally gets it and wonders if he'll get a chance to try it himself someday. Now it finally makes sense to our boy as to why Young-so didn't bother to extract the mana stone from the orc's corpse earlier. Anyway, Young-so points out that with abilities like this, our boy could easily solo this entire tunnel single-handedly. Jong-yum then explains that he didn't come here with the intention of clearing out the tunnel. He just wanted to check it out. If it seemed doable, he'd break through quietly and didn't mean to show off his abilities like that. Young-so then apologizes for tagging along, but our guy reassures him that there's no need to worry. He didn't know the way to the tunnel anyway, so if he had come alone, he wouldn't have been able to get through. He then suggests it's time to head back since the wyvern has retreated for now, but might attack again soon. That's when Young-so asks how far our guy plans to travel that he feels the need for a vehicle. Jong-yum explains that he's trying to reach his family, and his final destination is Uijeongbu, near the Gangnam district. This news takes Young-so by surprise because his own destination is on the same route to Gangnam. He reveals to Jong-yum that he's heading to Indeokwan, which is on the way, and asks if it would be too much trouble to let him tag along until they reach Indeokwan. Jong-yum isn't sure how to respond, but Young-so continues, saying that even if he gets through the tunnel, he's not confident he can make it home safely. His driving ability isn't much help in combat, but since Jong-yum can fight off monsters, he might have a better chance of reaching his family. Young-so then promises to help our boy reach Gangnam faster than anyone else, and swears he won't be a burden on their journey. He's even willing to provide food for our boy along the way. Jong-yum starts to see some real value in this partnership. Young-so's driving skills are beyond doubt, and more importantly, if this guy is on his side, he won't spill the beans about his abilities. It's a win-win situation because Jong-yum fears that if his abilities became known, there's no telling what people might do, maybe even try to assassinate him, though that might be overthinking it. Still, better safe than sorry. So, all in all, our guy finally gives Young-so the green light to tag along, and the dude perks up like a kid in a candy store. Jong-yum then tells him he'll handle the tunnel and makes it clear that Young-so should keep his abilities a secret. He even asks him to make sure everyone else stays out of his way. Young-so eagerly agrees, promising to ensure that everyone cooperates. He's super positive about it, ready to do his part. But things didn't go as Jong-yum hoped, because that foolish guy went ahead and told everyone that our boy would be able to break through the tunnel on his own using his awakened abilities. All they need to do is wait outside until he is done, and then they can move forward. Jong-yum is left wide-eyed and clueless, seeing that Young-so just spilled the beans on what was supposed to be a secret. The others are astonished by this news and are eager to see how Jong-yum is going to pull it off. Young-so, on the other hand, is more than happy to explain, while Jong-yum curses his rotten luck, realizing he's now in a tough spot. In the end, Jong-yum steps up and says that by tomorrow morning, he'll have the tunnel cleared for everyone to leave. In his mind, helping them is the best plan he has, considering they still have food supplies, which should keep things relatively calm. Once the supplies run out, chaos will likely erupt among everyone, so it's wise to clear the tunnel and ensure everyone can leave safely. That's when the manager calls out to Jong-yum, saying he won't pry into his abilities or ask any questions about them. Instead, the manager respects him for the decision he has made to help everyone. He offers some food supplies from their reserves to Jong-yum, which leaves him quite taken aback, because this much generosity is just too much. The manager explains that since Jong-yum risked his life to scout the tunnel, all they can offer in return is a bit of food. Now that he's even clearing the tunnel for them, they feel they can't repay him enough for his kindness. They apologize, saying all they can offer right now are a few words of gratitude. Jong-yum tries to explain that he did it for himself because he wanted to, and that they shouldn't have to go to such lengths to help him. He insists that the food must be meant for their families and tells them to keep it. Young-so, however, steps in and tells our boy to just take it, and further points out that rejecting the food would be too harsh for everyone involved. Young-so also reminds Jong-yum that he has a family too, just like everyone else. At that moment, Jong-yum sees how excited everyone is to reunite with their families, and it makes him feel a pang of sadness because doesn't want to let them down. As everyone enjoys their time together, the next day arrives. When they finally reach the tunnel entrance, Jong-yum tells everyone to stay back. He then starts pedaling his bike into the tunnel, determined to clear it out and come back. As he gets closer to the tunnel, he begins to spot the monsters. But before we see him battling them, the scene flashes back to his childhood. We see young Jong-yum with a sore eye from a fight with his sister. He complains about it to his father, and it leads to another argument with his sister, and they eventually start beating the shit out of each other in front of their father. That is when his father points out how close they seem to be. His father then reflects that he was an only child of his parents, so he always envied the bond between siblings. He tells them that they have no idea how envious he is of their relationship, and even though they may argue now, they'll soon realize how truly precious family is. Suddenly, their mother bursts into the room, leading to a hearty argument between their parents. It's at this moment that Jong-yum feels the warmth of family. The scene then transitions into the last night, where our boy is recalling all of these moments with his family after seeing how everyone is overjoyed at the prospect of finally reuniting with their families, knowing that Jong-yum would clear the path for them. They spent the entire night like that, basking in the warmth of anticipation. When midnight strikes and everyone falls asleep, Young-so wakes up to use the bathroom. Noticing that Jong-yum is missing, he heads outside and asks the patrolling guards about him. They report that Jong-yum said he was going out for some fresh air a while ago. He then further walks forward and looks around and finally spots our boy. He quickly asks why Jong-yum can't just sleep, and our boy replies that he can't sleep there. Just as Young-so looks in front, he is absolutely boggled out of his mind to see that the entire vehicle is filled to the brim with food and supplies. Young-so finds this ridiculous and quickly asks why he is giving away so much stuff. Our boy just casually mentions that he only loaded about half to avoid making the vehicle too heavy. But this amount should be more than enough for everyone. Young-so is even more astonished when Jong-yum says this is the last vehicle he had to load. The realization hits him quite hard because if this is the last vehicle, then our boy must have packed the other 15 vehicles with the same amount of supplies as well. Jong-yum quickly tells him to keep this a secret from everyone else. The man, however, points out that if he is giving away all of this stuff, what will they use during their journey? Our boy just casually says they still have plenty of supplies left. The man is left astonished to hear this, realizing that the amount of supplies our boy just generously gave away is more than what you will find in an entire logistics center. He can't fathom how much Jonghyum must have in stock to give away so much. We return to the present, where Jonghyum is effortlessly demolishing monsters like it's no big deal. As he fights, he thinks about how much easier it would be if he could just put all the people into his subspace and carry them to the other side. Unfortunately, his system states that with the current subspace level, it's not possible. But if he achieves subspace level 2, he could accommodate up to 20 people. To reach that level, he'd need to gather at least 100 mana stones. Jonghyum quickly does a mental tally and notes that there are at most about 40 monsters, with a few running away. Given the numbers, leveling up here isn't feasible. He still needs to think of another way to level up, because he eventually wants to put his own family into the subspace. Suddenly, Jonghyum notices something unusual among the fleeing monsters. A closer look reveals a particularly jacked up version of Wyvern, and I can tell that this is some kind of boss-level monster. Even Jonghyum isn't sure what he's dealing with. We finally cut back to the outside, where everyone is anxiously waiting for Jonghyum to come out. Some are starting to worry if he's okay inside that tunnel. They then finally spot him emerging from the tunnel, effortlessly pedaling his bicycle as if he's just out for a casual ride. His uniform is smeared in blood, and the group looks on anxiously. But they soon breathe a sigh of relief when they see a smile spreading across our boy's face. They burst into a joyous dance, celebrating the successful completion of their mission. Well, it seems like it's finally time for everyone to part ways and reunite with their loved ones. They express their gratitude to the manager for sticking with them until the very end, and hope that he gets safely home as well. Jonghyum hints that if they run into any trouble, they should try opening the cargo hold, as he has prepared a little gift that might be helpful. Everyone is intrigued and as well as curious about the gift, but they eventually get into their respective cargo trucks and start making their way through the traffic. Once they cross the tunnel, they wave their goodbyes one last time and head down their separate roads. We then see Jonghyum sitting in the passenger seat, still preoccupied with the monster he saw in the tunnel. He's unsure if it was actually a wyvern, as it fled so quickly that he didn't get a good look at it. He then starts wondering if the wyvern he spotted was a leader, or maybe just an adult version of these monsters. But his thoughts are cut off by a weird crunching noise coming from under their truck. When we look near the tires, we see that the trucks run over some dead bodies, and the driver's face is full of sadness from hearing the bones breaking. Even Jonghyum can see the regret on his friend's face, but they've got no choice but to keep moving. With bodies and wrecks everywhere, there's no clear path, and it's a mess no matter where they turn. He thinks to himself that if his discharge had been delayed by just 3 months, he might have been one of those dead soldiers. The whole situation is worse than they thought, with monsters still munching on the corpses. Suddenly, Youngso calls out to him, which snaps our boy out of his thoughts. Once he looks ahead, we see that the road is blocked up ahead. Youngso points out that the barbed wire looks like it was set up by the military to block something, and they'll have to take another route. He mentions there should be another bridge they can cross. But that is when our boy spots something at the end of the blocked bridge. And just as we take a closer look, we notice a new type of monsters we have never seen before. Now it finally makes sense what the military was trying to block. While Youngso is panicking and considering turning the car around, our boy sees this as an opportunity to level up his subspace. He then notices a narrow sidewalk on the road, perfectly blocked on both sides. He quickly tells his friend not to turn the car around and asks if he can pass the vehicle through that sidewalk. Jonghyum explains that he's come up with a good plan to get through this situation without having to turn back, and he's absolutely thrilled and excited about pushing this truck through a literal pedestrian sidewalk. Youngsu was shocked by such a suicidal choice, especially when an orc appeared in front among the hounds and started scattering the mutant hounds. The monsters didn't seem to be friendly with each other at all. Even though the orc had an advantage in size and strength, the mutated dogs were simply more numerous. Poor orc didn't stand a chance against such a hungry pack, and their hollow mouths didn't stop them from tearing flesh. Our two could only see the blood and flesh flying in every direction. Poor Youngsu was really scared, and even knowing the abilities of our hero doubted the sanity of the idea of going straight there. Just in case, he asked what Youngsu meant and whether he is really going to cross this bridge. Our hero was more than confident in his abilities and thought it was even easier than his frightened friend thought. While Youngsu was trying to gain courage, Jonghyum asked him a strange question. Had he ever heard of a game where 3 races wage war against each other? It's a certain space strategy game called Stark. But Youngsu was much older than our hero and didn't know anything about this game. Jonghyum decided to tell him a little about it. This game had content where players could play on customizable maps and change settings as they wanted to have fun. Among these maps, our hero's favorite was the one where he had to fend off swarms of monsters using limited units and terrain. And as Jong-yum thought, the current situation was very similar to that map. Of course, Young-soo had no idea why he was being told all this, but his understanding was not necessary in this situation. All he had to do was to do as Jong-yum told him. To begin with, Young-soo had to turn the car around and back up to the barbed wire barrier, of course tearing down the barbed wire, making as much noise as possible, thus attracting the attention of the monster hounds so busy with their bloody feast. Then it was Jong-yum's turn to get down to business. He activated his system and resorted to the last skill he wasn't even going to use. But now was the most suitable situation. He unlocked the auto ship skill by spending 10 magic stones. He immediately asked Pax to spend all the remaining magic stones to increase shipping speed. Pax did so without delay, and now the shipping speed had increased to 100 kilometers per hour. Now that everything was ready, Jong-yum could invite the mutant hounds that had been eating orc to come to him. After a hearty lunch, it is playtime. The unsuspecting dogs rushed forward, but they didn't make it in time. The double-door refrigerator quickly demolished them completely. As you can see, the game was not fun for the hounds. It didn't end with the first refrigerator, and more came after it. In just a few seconds, Jong-yum received 12 magic stones, and he was very happy about it. The reinforced shipping range and precision delivery he had improved while he was still clearing the tunnel. Jong-yum might be throwing axes instead of refrigerators now, and together with the recently improved speed of precision delivery, it could be quite effective. But while using precision delivery last time, Jong-yum found out that this skill doesn't track the target all the way through. Instead, precision delivery only slightly corrects the direction according to the movement of the target. This could be a big problem against these hounds that are not just fast, but incredibly quick. Even an axe flying at 100 kilometers per hour can be dodged by these hounds when attacked from afar. Moreover, these creatures are so fearless that they will not stop even if one of their kind dies right next to them. Considering the current situation, where the delivery interval is 2.5 seconds, axes will not be enough to hold off their onslaught. But the refrigerator, thanks to its size, is perfectly suited to destroy several targets in a single shipment. Not only is the fridge wide, but it's also heavy enough to take hounds down with just a graze. On top of that, the automatic delivery he had just improved proved to be very convenient. Jong-yum didn't even need to watch the battlefield. The system automatically destroyed any approaching threats. For now, our hero could just rest and relax. The hounds did not give up despite not even being able to get close to Jong-yum. All they had to do was howl with rage and keep trying. Although, let's be honest, against the flying refrigerators, they didn't stand a chance. As the battle continued, Young-soo had the carelessness to look back. He nearly lost his jaw from surprise when he realized what he saw. He thought that Jong-yum could only throw axes, but here were refrigerators that were beyond his imagination. Okay, one flying refrigerator was something he could still imagine, but a new flying refrigerator every 2 seconds was unbelievable. Besides, why would the logistics center keep so many refrigerators in stock? Young-soo began to wonder if it could be that the stock being retrieved was coming out as new products, even if axes are indeed retrieved and reused by his system. But how it could work with refrigerators was not clear to him. Young-soo just couldn't believe it and froze in place. He didn't even notice when Jong-yum came back to him and asked if he wanted something to eat. Young-soo finally realized what was going on and asked a question to make sure. He wondered if it was possible that Jong-yum's supply was infinite. Jong-yum was a bit surprised by such a question. He thought that Young-soo had figured it out a long time ago. But he was wrong. All this time, Young-soo had thought that Jong-yum was collecting axes after using them to recharge them, and couldn't even think that he actually had an infinite amount of them. In fact, Jong-yum did indeed collect the axes after use with the system, but only so that they wouldn't lie on the road and accidentally injure someone. Hearing this didn't make Young-soo feel any better. He still couldn't believe that items could be infinite. When he came to his senses a little, our hero asked again what he wanted to eat. Young-soo had had a difficult day of emotional turmoil today, and a Coke Zero and a donut was more than enough for him. While they were eating quietly in peace to themselves, behind them, the delivery system was mercilessly scattering hounds. Young-soo was a little ashamed of his stupidity and that he had underestimated Jong-yum's abilities, but he was still grateful for the food, even if it was infinite. Our hero was only happy to share and was also grateful to Young-soo for his trust from the beginning. Now if he needed anything, he should just let our hero know. He had almost everything in stock, but Young-soo was in no hurry to overuse someone else's generosity. He had enough of what Jong-yum had done for him, clearing the way of monsters and helping him get home faster. Literally, after they crossed this bridge, it would only be an hour's journey to his home. Jong-yum was happy to hear that his friend would be able to see his family soon. Young-soo was too, but he also had fears of what he might see there, and he just hoped that nothing had happened to his family and they were safe. Jong-yum understood him very well, for he too was worried about his parents and sisters. He wanted to give Young-soo some kind of gift and noticed his ragged clothes. He shouldn't have come back to his family like this. Besides, the hounds were still continuing their futile attempts, and they had time to solve the clothing problem. The only remaining question was what style Yongsoo would choose. He was already uncomfortable that our hero was helping him even with clothes, but he didn't refuse. Besides, Yongsoo was sure that Jongyum had what he needed: aviator glasses and a cool jacket. Just what a top-class driver needed to drive around the apocalyptic landscape. Just in time, the hounds were almost finished. Just a couple more to go. With a new look, Yongsoo gained an unprecedented confidence, and sure of the truck's durability, decided to head out right away. His movements were fast and precise. Even Formula One drivers would envy him. Jongyum only had time to grab on tightly before Yongsoo pressed the gas. The remaining hounds didn't even try to stop them, and they drove straight down the narrow road. Yongsoo was lightning fast regarding everything about driving. At this rate, he only needed 20 minutes to drive home, but Jongyum needed to hold on tight. Our hero's truck flew down the broken roads as if it were a highway. Poor Jongyum asked Yongsoo in vain to drive slower, and it looked like he was about to throw up. Luckily, his suffering wasn't long. They finally arrived at Yongsoo's house, or rather, to what was once his home. Now it's a ruin. Kim Jongyum and Yongsoo had reached their destination. Looking at it from afar, the apartment complex was in extremely poor condition. The structure was already old, and the attacks had nearly demolished it. The surrounding buildings suffered the same fate. The whole district was not built to withstand a monster apocalypse after all. There were remnants of buildings and debris cluttering the road, but oddly enough, no corpses could be seen littering the ground. The view was very different from the main street, where bodies were scattered all over the place. The duo entered one of the crumbling buildings, and Yongsoo faced his home's door for the first time in a while. His hand trembled at the thought of his family on the other side of the entryway. He just needed to press the number, open the door, and go inside. Those were 3 simple steps, but he couldn't bring himself to move his hand to the keypad out of debilitating fear. Jongyum watched from behind. He could see that his new buddy was having an impossibly hard time opening the door. Yongsoo had stepped on the gas so hard that they covered a distance that should have taken an hour in less than 20 minutes. That was how eager he was to see his family again. He drove to this area, fueled by thoughts of his wife and kid. But if he had to face a cold corpse inside their home, he might not be able to handle it. There was no way he could open that door, no matter how much resolve he had. Anyone would be stunned at the thought of the worst-case scenario. Jongyum reckoned it would be best if he took the lead and opened the door instead. He tapped Yongsoo on the shoulder, and he tensed up. Our boy asked if he could press the doorbell for Yongsoo's sake instead. At first, the S-tier driver didn't know whether to accept or not, but he eventually accepted Jongyum's kind offer. No one would want to confirm their family's death, especially in this uncertain era of instability. If Jongyum were in Yongsoo's position, he'd rather have someone else open the door, even if there was only a 1% chance of seeing his loved ones lifeless. Finally, Jongyum pressed the doorbell, and they waited with bated breath. As it turned out, he didn't even have to knock or press the bell. A person inside the house slowly opened the entrance. The duo turned to the door as they heard it creak open. Yongsoo's eyes widened as he stared at the person opening the door to his home. His wife and little girl stood at the entryway, seemingly waiting for him all this time. When she saw her husband, who hadn't come back throughout the confusing and tumultuous descent of monsters, she couldn't believe her eyes. Yongsoo's tears finally escaped. He felt the joy and relief of seeing his family alive after dreading the possibility of never seeing them again. He quickly ran toward his wife and daughter, covering them in a tight, loving embrace. Jongyum watched the heartfelt reunion from the sidelines. He was happy his new buddy got a good ending. They didn't even have to knock or ring the doorbell. Yongsoo's wife just knew she had to open it. She heard a noise and looked through the peephole to see her husband. While he thanked every deity for keeping his family safe, Yongsoo's daughter clung to her father, crying and telling him she hated him for making them worry so much. After a few minutes of sobbing, Yongsoo's wife finally noticed another person standing in the hallway. Yongsoo introduced Jongyum as the benefactor who helped him get back safely. At that moment, our boy's vision turned blurry as his world spun, and everything went black. He fell, lost strength in his legs, and started to lose consciousness for unknown reasons. Yongsoo worriedly called out his name, but he looked way too dazed. The last thing Jongyum saw was the hazy silhouette of Yongsoo and his family. He knew he shouldn't be losing consciousness here and now, but it was out of his control. What little light remained faded, and he couldn't take it anymore. Jongyum's mind drifted to a distant memory when he curiously asked his dad why he wasn't crying. Dad just looked at him reassuringly and explained that parting with loved ones didn't bring only sadness. All kinds of emotions come to mind. You inevitably remember all the time spent together. It was the day of Grandma's funeral, and Dad felt affection, gratitude, regret, longing, a wide array of emotions. He firmly believed farewells didn't need to be solely sad. Upon reflecting, Dad felt more gratitude than sadness. Gratitude for being shown the true essence of love. His mother had given him a heart that cared without expecting anything in return. It would be difficult for a child to understand now, but one day, as time passed and Jonghyum gained more life experience, he would realize the same thing. Dad firmly believed his little boy would understand that giving and receiving love would never be easy. From the memory of his grandma's funeral, Jonghyum's subconscious brought him to a more playful one. He was transported to the days when his sister would beat him mercilessly with pillows. She weaponized pillows and proudly beat her brother to the ground. It always ended with him crying from the pain, sometimes with a matching injury on his face. His sister was ruthless, though. She insisted she didn't even hit him hard. She even used the pillow to soften the blow, yet he cried like a baby. Little crybaby Jonghyum ran to snitch on Dad while his sister celebrated her victory. Once again, Kim Sol had successfully defended the household's championship title. The siblings bickered and fought a lot, but from Dad's perspective, they were as thick as thieves. Dad always lectured them about how, despite resenting and annoying one another now, the day would come when they'd realize just how precious family is and what love truly feels like. Then, Mom would come and lecture her husband about yapping and not helping her prepare dinner. That night, Jonghyum remembered how good the piping hot stew looked on the dining table. The whole family sat at the dining table while Juyeon was busy fiddling with her phone. Mom asked if she was texting a crush, but that's just how middle school girls act. They can't go one day without texting their friends. On TV, a professional fight, personally curated by Kim Sol, was playing. Mom couldn't even watch her dramas, with the feisty little girl hogging the TV. Given that Sol was going to middle school next year, she thought of trying out for the boxing or combat sports club. She even picked a school with the best sports program. At that time, middle school was still a distant concept for little Jonghyum. Years passed, and he finally graduated from primary school and joined the same middle school his sister attended. He looked at the welcome banner for freshmen and breathed in the air of his first day. Jonghyum awkwardly looked around, surrounded by unfamiliar faces. He watched as some kids laughed and walked together to their respective classes. He could still picture how neat and radiant their new uniforms looked. Jonghyum couldn't help but compare himself to his better-off classmates. While they wore new, perfectly fitted uniforms, he had to wear an old, used one that looked way too big for his lanky frame. Despite the stark difference between his jacket and theirs, young Jonghyum still smiled and held his head high. It's just a school uniform after all. What a young Chad. His positive outlook on middle school quickly faded when he became a target for lowlifes. He tried to do the right thing and defend a bullied classmate against some delinquent upperclassmen. All it got him was countless cruel stomps as he desperately protected his head from senseless violence. Just as one of the delinquents was about to hit him in the face, a firm grip stopped the bastard cold. It was Kim Sol. She'd gone through a growth spurt and had been training with the school's club for a while now. She looked down at the delinquent like she was looking at an ant. Kim Sol easily dispatched the delinquents, who had been hassling her little brother. Afterward, she turned to Jonghyum and enlisted him into her club. From then on, he was required to join the morning exercise. He thought he was just getting bailed out by his monstrous sister, but that was far from the truth. Little Jonghyum was subjected to a hellish training regimen designed by his sadistic older sister every single day. He kept up with this routine, met some good friends, and continued to live a peaceful and vibrant middle school life. A few years later, their eldest sister, Juyeon, got accepted into a prestigious nursing school. Their mom, dad, and siblings could not believe their eyes. Jonghyum kept up his training a few years after that. Can you see those gains, bro? At that time, a life-changing letter arrived in the mail. He read the snail mail sent by the government with terror on his face. It was time for him to fulfill his mandatory military enlistment notice. Mom waved goodbye, Dad stood proud, and Saul laughed at his new look as they sent him off to training camp. He had to shave his head. He looked pretty good with a buzz cut, though. Mom yelled at him to come back safely and avoid getting hurt. Dad simply told him to never be discouraged, no matter what happened. Along with the other bald boys enlisting, Jonghyum walked with his head held high. He could still hear his family cheering him on as he walked toward the military camp's entrance. Once he was far enough that they couldn't see his face, Jonghyum's tears finally came pouring down. He loved his family. He loved how supportive they were and how much they loved him in return. His memories shifted into dreams, and his dreams ended as he slowly opened his eyes. To his surprise, he was lying down on a soft futon in an unfamiliar room. He sat up looking around in a panic. Not recognizing his surroundings, he began to sweat profusely. The last thing he remembered was fainting near the doorway. He could recall Yongsoo meeting his family, but the memory felt a little hazy. Just to be safe, he instinctively reached for an axe from Pax. Jonghyum was startled when a voice from behind asked if he had slept well. He turned around to see Yongsoo's wife and daughter sitting at the dining table, peacefully eating their meal. Both of them looked at him with puzzled expressions as he stood there, axe in hand. Jonghyum was frozen in place, unsure of what to do as he awkwardly stared at them. He was still reeling from his heartfelt dream and did not know what was happening or what to say in this situation. Scanning the room, he saw Young-soo sleeping soundly, not far from his futon. Young-soo's wife worriedly asked Jong-yum if he was okay. He had just suddenly collapsed and fallen asleep like a baby outside. He was so zonked out that they didn't want to wake him. Realizing he was in a safe environment, he felt terrible for immediately reaching for his axe like a cornered animal. He quietly threw the thing back into his private dimension and asked how long he had been out. He hadn't even slept that long, just knocked out for about 3 hours. Also, Young-soo had already told his wife everything that happened. He wouldn't stop talking about how much of a help Jong-yum had been in getting home in one piece. For that, Mrs. Young-soo was thankful. If it weren't for this young man, she might never have seen her husband again. The sincerity of her words made him feel awkward, as he insisted that Young-soo also helped him a lot. At that moment, the suave driver woke up and insisted that, in comparison to the help he received, he couldn't say he'd done much at all. Jong-yum had saved his life multiple times after all. Mrs. Young-soo invited the boys to have a meal before they talked. Mr. Young-soo insisted on waiting for Jong-yum to wake up to eat together, so he had been napping. With a warm and relaxed smile on his face, Young-soo invited the young man to the dining table. Jong-yum returned the warm smile with one of his own. As soon as he sat at the table, he was greeted by a freshly made, piping hot homemade meal glistening under the light. It was a conger eel stew. Jong-yum was not expecting to be served such a lavish meal when the apocalypse had been raging for days. Mrs. Young-soo hoped the stew would suit his taste as she wanted to treat her husband's savior to something a little more generous than usual. But with limited ingredients, this stew was the best she could make. Jong-yum wasn't lying when he said there was no more luxurious meal than this. Since Mrs. Young-soo and her little girl had already eaten, she left the boys to eat their fill. He found it a little odd that she would go as far as to leave the room, but the food in front of him looked too good to think about anything else. He took a spoonful of the stew, making sure to get a little bit of everything in that sucker. When he put that thing in his mouth, it felt like he was ascending to the high heavens. It tasted so good he reached enlightenment. It looked like he had tasted the nectar of the gods. The taste brought on a bright sensation and a surge of emotion. The vast and diverse flavors of the stew unfolded on the tip of his tongue. He couldn't figure out how Mrs. Young-soo managed to balance the sweet and oily taste of stir-fried kimchi. What lingered in his mouth was the clean, savory taste of mackerel and the kick of kimchi. Despite the rich and complex taste profiles, somehow it felt cozy, like it was made with a ton of love. Bro went full-on food wars on that stew. He finished the bowl and respectfully put the spoon down on the table. Both Jong-yum and Young-soo had been eating convenient foods from packs, so warming their stomachs with a homemade meal felt life-changing. It made our boy contemplative about his life. Since the world ended up like this? No. Ever since he left the military 3 months ago, this conger eel stew had been the best meal he'd had. It was almost comparable to his mother's kimchi stew. His thoughts were interrupted by Young-soo's question. If he remembers correctly, Jong-yum was supposed to cut through the Gangnam area. Without a hint of hesitation, Young-soo offered to drive him there. This left the young man confused. Young-soo asserted that he had already discussed his plans with his wife. When he told her that Jong-yum was on a quest to find his family, she insisted that Jong-yum's family mattered too. But Gangnam wouldn't be his final destination. The trip would take much longer as he planned to go to Uijeongbu, and he'd need the vehicle for a lot longer. Young-soo had already thought about that, so he laid out his conditions. But first, they should take this conversation outside. The sun was about to set and the sky looked gorgeous. Young-soo gave Jong-yum the rundown of the plan to use the truck to reach Gangnam. Once the drive was over, he would return to his family using an electric bicycle. That was also the condition he wanted to bring up. He wanted to have the electric bicycle for personal use. Even though he felt a little weird asking for the bike, he still wanted to be of help. If it was okay with the young man, Young-soo would gladly drive him to Gangnam as fast as humanly possible. Jong-yum understood the plan. It was pretty simple after all. But something wasn't clicking quite right. Why would a family man, just reunited with his loved ones, take on such a high-risk mission? Of course, with his driving skills, he could probably outrun most monsters with ease and immaculate style. But aside from his driving skills, he would still be putting himself in grave danger. Young-soo had just won the game. His family was alive. They had food and supplies in the cargo hold, so there was no reason to make such a risky move for a stranger. Curious about his reasoning, Jong-yum outright asked what was going through the family man's head. Why would he stick his neck out trying to help someone he just met? Well, his reasoning was as simple as it gets. Jong-yum had saved him before and helped him get back to his wife and kid. Wasn't it only fair that he returned the favor? Also, he asked why Jong-yum helped him in the first place. The young man tried to think of an answer, but he couldn't. He had acted out of the goodness of his heart. Young-soo was well aware that he wouldn't have survived or made it this far without Jong-yum. Maybe he wouldn't have even escaped the tunnel and might have died a miserable death. So, he just wanted to try returning the favor and give as much help in return as he could. Moreover, they were actually in the same situation if you thought about it. Sure, Jong-yum had awakened a brokenly overpowered ability, but that didn't mean the journey would be easy. Even though the world was in ruins, people still held on to the hope that their families were safe. Right now, Jong-yum was just another survivor trying to stay strong in the same difficult situation. Wouldn't it be nice if they just helped each other? Even though Yongsoo felt presumptuous, given that all he could offer was his driving skills, he still wanted to give this partnership a shot. He assured the young man that if things took a turn for the worse, he would flee to safety without hesitation. He wasn't foolish enough to risk his life or his family. For some reason, Jong-yum recalled pedaling toward the tunnel full of wyverns as the survivors cheered him on and wished him luck. On the way to the tunnel, he spotted a car with the key still in the ignition. This could have solved his problems right then and there. But at the end of the day, he chose to continue pedaling forward for the sake of the other people relying on him. He gave up the easy way out in hopes of saving more lives. Reminiscing about that not-so-distant memory made him smile. He didn't regret going down that route. Yongsoo was still pitching his plan to the young man, unsure if Jong-yum would agree. Jong-yum then explained that his subspace ability was a space where nothing could enter without his permission. As long as the subspace was maintained, he could even duplicate items from the storage facility endlessly. Yongsoo already knew that much, though. If he really wanted to help, Jong-yum proposed one more condition. First, they would have to cut through Gangnam, Yuljiro, Dobonggu, and finally, Uijeongbu. He wanted Yongsoo to drive him all the way to the last stop until they found Jong-yum's entire family. Second, the young man reckoned he wouldn't be able to accomplish the mission alone. However, upon leveling up, the subspace would be open to harboring other people inside. That could include Yongsoo's family. Jong-yum opened his subspace and insisted that if the man of the house was going, his entire family should come too. Thanks to wiping out the monster dog population in the city, he finally had enough mana crystals to level up the subspace. If Yongsoo continued helping Jong-yum find his family, he would gladly protect the girls too. Yongsoo was equally shocked and amused by yet another crazy feature of the young man's ability. He coolly removed his aviator glasses and agreed to bring his wife and daughter on this deadly road trip across the country. Hell, they could head out right here and now. With his current stockpile of 116 mana stones, he could spend 100 to upgrade to a level 2 subspace, leaving him with 16 in the bank. Upon confirmation, the system booted up the upgrade sequence seamlessly. The upgrade was successful, and level 2 was achieved. The maintenance costs were also adjusted from 1 mana stone a day to a whopping 6 every 24 hours. At least the capacity had been expanded to accommodate up to 20 people at once. An additional ability that allowed the user to store items in front of him had also been added. Sure, the maintenance cost of 6 mana stones was a bit steep, but it came with a few additional abilities and enhancements available with the upgrade. He decided to check those out later and take care of a more important matter for now. Jong-yum signaled Lee Yongsoo, Lee Yoljong, and Oh Ji-soo to enter his subspace, and the system notified the host of their presence. Upon giving them permission to enter, the family went through the portal and set foot inside. 1 second, they were outside a broken-down building. The next, they were transported to an entirely different space. Yongsoo's wife and kid were wide-eyed and in awe of the view in front of them. Even Yongsoo himself, who was familiar with the PAX fulfillment center, was speechless. The scale of the subspace was enormous. Shelves upon shelves of all kinds of supplies lined up left and right. Jong-yum called PAX to come over and demonstrate the crux of the subspace to the family. He explained that they could just tell the friendly artificial intelligence anything they needed while staying. They could check the availability of items from PAX, and if necessary, he'd handle delivery as well. There was a fresh food center somewhere in the area where they could get all kinds of food and ingredients. Yongsoo's wife knew how precious fresh ingredients were in the apocalypse, so she was hesitant to just freely use the young man's resources. That wasn't a big deal, though, as everything in this subspace was infinite. Everything could be endlessly duplicated, so there was no need to be prudent. For now, they should take a little break and head out in about 30 minutes, as he needed to consolidate and check some new things regarding his abilities. Jong-yum's warm welcome cheered the family up. Yongsoo even took the opportunity to play princess with his daughter after a long time apart. Just like that, the new addition to the subspace adjusted quickly to their new life. With that taken care of, it was time to get right into business and check out the new abilities. At subspace level 2, he could now activate the subspace lab for 50 mana stones. He could open a laboratory where he could combine, classify, and transform registered items in the subspace. I bet he's about to make an axe plus refrigerator hybrid or something. As we've established, Kim Jong-yum's ability is to create a subspace where he can store an object with a storage capacity of 1 item. It was initially intended to be a one-time use storage he could access whenever he wanted. Nothing could enter or exit this space unless he explicitly allowed it. This was probably the original extent of his simple ability, but that no longer seems to be the case. Due to a crazy twist of fate, he managed to place a logistics center inside. In doing so, Pax AI and the Awakening operating system merged to form something entirely different. It enhanced his ability beyond just opening and closing a subspace, resulting in many more functions than intended. A prime example of this is the shipment mechanism, allowing him to hurl items at 100 kilometers per hour. The subspace ability alone should have been impressive by itself, but after meeting Pax, it became even crazier. Jongyum wasn't expecting to gain any additional abilities upon leveling up. Here we are upgrading to level 2 and unlocking one more slot for his storage capacity. This meant he could store more than just the Pax fulfillment center in his subspace. On top of that, he unlocked the option to install a lab where he could manipulate items registered in his subspace. The idea of creating something by combining two different items was fascinating, but it required a whopping 50 magic stones to start, so that would have to wait for now. In any case, it's clear that leveling up would only make his abilities more overpowered from now on. He really wanted to check out all the new features, but he was too short on mana stones. For now, there is one thing he can confirm. When he first stored Pax FC in the subspace, Jongyum thought he had lost his mind, so he just casually blurted out the command to store the whole center without thinking twice. If it's true that he could absorb and store anything, then could he go crazy with it? When the system asked what he would like to store next, Jongyum resolutely answered that he wanted to store the entire planet Earth. He was prompted to confirm his choice, and he did. Tension filled the air as he waited for the results. After a few seconds of silence, the system informed him that it failed to store the entire planet, as the target was outside the storable range. Jongyum already figured it wouldn't work, but he had to give it a try. The ability would have been too overpowered if the command had gone through. From behind, Yongsoo approached to discuss the route they should take to reach Gangnam as quickly as possible. Yongsoo suggested taking the main road for now. Jongyum was expecting a few more minutes of rest, as Yongsoo was supposed to be playing with his daughter after being apart for so long. But they would have to save that playtime for later, as the little girl had already passed out, surrounded by all kinds of toys. She felt safe inside the subspace and fell asleep after just a little playtime. Yongsoo thanked the young man once more for everything he had done for him and his family. Humble as always, Jongyum asserted that it was no big deal, as they were simply helping each other in these tumultuous times. This filled Yongsoo with a strong sense of duty to repay Jongyum no matter what. Next thing you know, the duo was back on the cargo truck. Jongyum sat in the passenger seat and suddenly felt uneasy at the earnestness of his driver buddy. He looked at Yongsoo and his peaceful smile. Driving was the only thing Yongsoo was good at. If we're talking speed, he would confidently claim he's faster than anyone on the planet. Jongyum felt uneasy at Yongsoo's stillness and asked if they could go slowly for now. He even said, "Please." But Yongsoo was already locked in. He intended to speedrun this whole trip and make the young man experience real speed. Jongyum's tears fell as the truck sped up without warning. And so, with Yongsoo's family safe in the subspace, the boys braved the abandoned world in their speeding cargo truck. It didn't take long to reach the next leg of their journey after staying on the main road for a few minutes. They had to switch to an alternative route, which was more deserted than the main road. Luckily, there didn't seem to be many monsters roaming the area either, meaning monsters only gathered where people were. Jongyum hadn't known there was an isolated road like this on the way to Seoul. The area was supposed to be a Bronze Age archaeological site or something, so it was protected from urban development. The road was a bit tough, but they didn't have to worry about random monsters or shady people popping up. Jongyum was already drained just from sitting next to such a recklessly skillful driver. Much to Yongsoo's surprise, there seemed to be a blockade in the middle of the road. They had just left the ruined city, and this area was supposed to be an abandoned path, yet man-made deterrents cluttered the ground. If he wasn't mistaken, it looked like military barricades, complete with spike strips to stop any vehicle daring to go off-road. Maybe the military was still active in this area. Maybe there was a base nearby. That seemed like the simplest answer, but Jongyum didn't think this installation appeared here so simply. Looking through the side mirror, he spotted an armed military vehicle approaching from behind. Upon closer inspection, the driver and the others in the vehicle didn't look like they belonged to the military at all. Those guys had probably been watching the truck from a hiding spot. The duo wouldn't be able to avoid them. Jongyum proposed opening a small portal under the steering wheel, so Yongsoo could go inside with his family while he dealt with the strangers alone. If these people intended to kill them, they would have already shot at the cargo truck. Assessing the situation, Jongyum saw 3 people, all armed. The leading man hoped to see the truck's tires burst or something. When Jongyum feigned innocence and asked what was going on, the man looked at him like what was about to happen was common sense. He ordered the young man in the driver's seat to get out and open the cargo. Jongyum played along with their demands and slowly opened the cargo hold of the truck. He revealed stacks upon stacks of supply boxes, surprising the thugs posing as military personnel. Just the small pile of tuna boxes alone would be priceless in the current situation. They truly hit the jackpot. They figured the young man must be a delivery guy of some sort, and Jong-yum kept up the act. The leader claimed the truck and all its contents, implicitly threatening to gun Jong-yum down. As expected, they were just after food and supplies. When asked where he got the contents of the truck, the young man carefully considered his answer. He simply said he got everything from a logistics center. Technically, he wasn't lying, but he also warned them that they wouldn't find the logistics center. Besides, the only roads to it had already collapsed or been blocked, but if they needed more, he could get more. The leader looked Jong-yum up and down, sizing him up. When asked about the remaining supplies in this so-called logistics center, Jong-yum said what was in the truck was just a fraction of the bulk. One of the goons looked at his watch and warned the leader they were out of time. They had to wrap things up, so the captain ordered his goons to grab a hood. One of them was tasked with driving the truck, and the captain took care of Jong-yum. He did so by launching a punch imbued with mysterious energy straight into Jong-yum's abdomen. Caught off guard, Jong-yum gritted his teeth in pain as he slowly passed out from the blow. He folded like an omelet, and everything turned dark. When he regained consciousness, he heard the thugs calling someone "Sir" as they dragged him into a room. The captain reported what he had heard from Jong-yum about the supplies in the logistics center. Finally, the hood was taken off, and Jong-yum slowly opened his eyes, still in pain from the punch. In front of him was a burly man sitting on the other side of an office desk. A plaque on the desk bore the title "Commander." The South Korean flag was proudly placed front and center. No matter how you looked at it, the man sitting at the commander's desk didn't seem like one. Furthermore, there were bloody soldier corpses on the side of the office. The thugs had brought Jong-yum to a strange place. The big boss had already heard a bit from his boys, but he wanted to hear more about this food and supplies directly from Jong-yum's lips. He wanted to know where the logistics center was. Jong-yum continued playing along, confessing that he got everything from the Gunpo Logistics Center. The big boss praised him for making a smart move. He even wished he had hit up a place like that early on. Jong-yum asked where he was and what was going on. The big boss explained they were obviously in a military base, though he couldn't remember the name of the place. From the surrounding area, Jong-yum was sure they were in a communications headquarters. The big boss had been exempt from mandatory military service, so he didn't care about the name. One quirk of this place happened every evening at 6 p.m. It would be faster if Jong-yum had just seen it for himself. When the clock hit 6, a blood-curdling scream filled the room and the entire military base. Big Boss and his men had already gotten used to these terrifying shrieks. Unsettled, Jong-yum looked out the window. He could not help but feel a bit of familiarity from the blood-curdling sound. Outside were wyverns freely roaming the skies as the sun set. There were dozens of them blocking out the light with their massive bodies and enormous wingspans. But these weren't the typical wyverns that Jong-yum was used to killing. These creatures were way too big. Big Boss could not agree more. The size of those bastards was no joke. Big Boss took great pride in his strength, but even he almost died fighting one of those scaly beasts. Weirdly enough, his attacks felt like they were being blocked by something intangible. According to the soldier with his head smashed into the wall on the side of the office, the military tried to fight those monsters with guns, and they got helplessly wiped out. If supernatural powers didn't work, there was no way ordinary bullets would. So, the military opted to recruit others to fight those monsters. Big Boss wanted to join in until he saw how strong the beasts were and how weak the military was. He did what every big boss would do and took over the entire base, ruling over the area. Well, he didn't really kill the remnants of the military force, and he didn't want to kill Jong-yum either. The young man seemed to know a lot, and the food situation in the base was horrendous. There were plenty of weapons and everything else in the communication headquarters, but what they were severely lacking was food. So, he wanted to tap into that logistics center and get some. The departure would be tomorrow morning. If Jong-yum did this for him, Big Boss promised to accept him as a member of their family. He asserted that the group could protect the young man from monsters like that oversized wyvern outside. Unfortunately for the Big Boss, Jong-yum had stopped listening to him yap for a while now. He was wondering what to put inside his subspace, and it seemed like fate had just handed him the perfect place on a silver platter. Ignoring the people around him, he spoke to Pax and requested that the Joint Command Communications headquarters be stored in the subspace. Confused by Jong-yum's words, Big Boss threatened to kill the young man. Before he could even finish his threats, his office had already vanished. The entire military base was erased as if it had never existed in the first place. Big Boss looked around in confusion. The only thing left from his stronghold was the office chair. It was like a fucked up dream. Every personnel inside the military base camp looked up in confusion as the ceiling turned into the open sky. Big Boss is as confused as his men. He looked around, trying to make sense of the situation, but there was no reasonable or logical explanation for it. Amidst the confusion, Kim Jong-yum silently endured the drawback of his ability. Just like when he stored Pax's facility, he was suddenly assaulted by the side effects of storing a massive complex in his subspace. He needs to cut his restraints quickly while all the guards are distracted. Distraction quickly turned to fear when the rebels saw the sky darken. Countless silhouettes of massive wyverns filled the airspace, and they were inching closer by the second. Led by the leader of the pack, the wyverns steadily descended for the human meat free-for-all feast. Its mighty roar reverberated throughout the area, a terrifying display of dominance. Afraid of getting caught and eaten by the draconic beasts, the rebels scattered as they ran for their lives. Jongyum managed to summon an axe to cut himself loose. Big Boss reprimands his idiotic crew to stop running and shoot instead. They just need to take down the smaller wyverns before handling the big one with their numbers advantage. They might not be able to get the job done with guns, but he is confident in his own ability. Maybe his plan could have worked if his men listened, but they didn't. Everyone left their boss to fend for himself. Unfortunately for the Big Boss, he has been marked by the largest wyvern of the pack. Standing face to face, he cannot help but feel awfully small in front of the colossal beast. Big Wyvern gave the Big Boss a cursory glance, but something shinier caught its attention. A few meters away, Jongyum opens his subspace while carrying the tortured soldier on his shoulders. The subspace recognized the soldier as Han Hyung-ho, and Jongyum granted him permission to enter. As soon as they set foot inside the safety of the subspace, the young man felt dizzy and lightheaded. He managed to sneak out in the middle of the chaos, but he really needs to take account of the after-effects of subspace storing. If he suffers the dire side effects in a critical moment, it could be dangerous. Jongyum turned to look outside and saw the curious wyvern staring directly at him. There is no telling what the beast is thinking about. But one thing's for sure, the curious stare made Jongyum uneasy. This staring contest is interrupted by a pesky bug trying to square up with the giant wyvern. Big Boss clenched his fists and started pounding on the monster's body with all his strength. He cursed at the lizard bastard as he threw multiple punches. He was quite confident that he could stand against such a beast after leveling up a little. He wanted to show that he was built different compared to his cowardly crew that had run away. Jongyum gave the pathetic Big Boss one final glance as he walked deeper into his subspace. The worried Lee Yong-soo hurriedly met him at the entrance. Aside from the headache and exhaustion, Jongyum felt fine, but the stranger he brought in was not. All they know is that Han Hyung-ho is a soldier who was tortured by rebellious gangsters, and he's in critical condition. For now, they have the bloodied soldier situated in one of the rooms. Jongyum pulled off a great escape, and he finally breathed with relief. Inspecting the soldier's injuries, it seems like the gangsters did not inflict any major wounds or bleeding. From what Jongyum heard, Han Hyung-ho was already in bad shape due to starvation. Malnutrition and torture are a tough combo to suffer from. Changing the subject, Jongyum asked if a new building had appeared somewhere in the subspace. Yong-soo confirmed and curiously asked what that was about. It just appeared beside the facility so suddenly, confusing Yong-soo and his family. From the outside, it looked absolutely massive. Even Jongyum himself was shocked at its size. When he brought the military base inside, he did not expect it to be so big. He was blindfolded when he was taken and never got to look at the exterior. Jongyum was eager to check on something, so he asked Yong-soo to watch over the injured soldier for a bit. Yong-soo thought he had already seen the extent of the young man's ability, but absorbing a whole military base was just insane. He wondered what Jongyum was planning with it. The exterior of the military base was so spacious that he had to bike around the field. While pedaling, he thinks of the endless possibilities and use cases that the military base brings. Guns, ammo, explosives, gas masks, and even military vehicles are now accessible. It's the perfect arsenal to survive in this apocalyptic world. But unlike his logistics center, using the base might be more of a hassle. In the center, PAX handles everything automatically. Shipping things out can even be used as a potent weapon. But the guns are in the armory, and the ammo, magazines, and explosives must be stored securely. If they need something from the base, they might have to fetch it themselves. Finding out where everything is housed will be a problem. The base is way too big to explore and catalog. Even if they find the weapons and ammo, there's still a bit of a problem. Even if he armed Yong-soo, the lack of combat experience will be an issue. He reckoned that securing tons of firearms would not be as valuable without the proper personnel to utilize them. Taking the guns out and assembling them would be a pain. More importantly, the military supplies are not infinite like in the logistics center. They need to be cautious and wise in using limited resources manually. Pax interjected to debunk all of Jongyum's assumptions. The whole subspace is programmed with the logistics system format by Pax's AI. So, the recently added Sector 2 is being treated as a warehouse and storage accordingly. Jongyum stopped pedaling in shock at what Pax was implying. Currently, a classification system is underway. Once the process is complete, Jongyum will be free to use the items from Sector 2, just like the ones in Sector 1. Pax is basically saying that the rifles and ammo can also be duplicated and shipped out. The drone gave him a happy smile, confirming how OP the subspace really is. The young man is still reeling from shock. However, as Pax mentioned, the classification process is still ongoing, and Sector 2 is inaccessible at the moment. Current progress is at 0.81%. It's difficult to provide an exact estimate of the processing duration as time varies depending on the items. Thankfully, Jung-Yum can pick the items he wants to prioritize to be assigned with product codes first. When asked for his priority list, he immediately rattled off rifles, ammo, grenades, vehicles, and fuel. He is not messing around. With priority assignment, the product codes for the items listed will be available within 10 minutes. Jung-Yum also added a restriction to block other people from ordering items from Sector 2. Pax easily added the order restriction. It's not that he does not trust Young-Soo and his family. It's just better to err on the side of caution, especially with the unconscious soldier with them. With weapons and vehicles ready, Jung-Yum opened his portal while hoping that the chaos had settled down outside. Jung-Yum came across a scene straight out of a gory horror movie with the wyverns happily feasting on human flesh scattered all over the place. He was banking on the situation resolving itself, but that does not seem so likely now. There are far too many monsters to try and shake off, and escaping from the big one is practically impossible. So the only option he has right now is to lock in and finally use his new weapons. Young-Soo and Jung-Yum geared up in the face of adversity. It has been ages since Mr. Lee Young-Soo graduated from the reserve forces, yet here he is, shooting once more. Plenty of magazines have been packed in boxes, so they shouldn't run out of rounds. If the gun jams, they can just toss it away and grab a fresh one. It would have been nice if the loaded magazines came pre-attached to the guns, but that's not how the system registered them. When the young man asked the old-timer if he could shoot, Young-Soo smiled confidently. Unk finally has plenty of living targets on which to test his reservist skills. He was built for this. Since seeing is faster than explaining, he took one of the guns and aimed at the beasts. The muzzle fire lit up the dark and gloomy battlefield as a rain of bullets showered the voracious wyverns. Against Young-Soo and Jung-Yum's bullet hell, the small ones bled and died on the spot. Who would have thought that Young-Soo is not just a badass driver? He's a wyvern-killing John Wick too. They quickly went through dozens of magazines and hundreds of rounds without stopping. The duo picked off every enemy they could spot with precision. It helped that the big-body wyverns were easy targets. The sound of incessant gunfire finally halted. This was Young-Soo's first time doing a real rapid-fire shoot-around, and it was tougher than he expected. It seems like they have succeeded in getting the situation under control for now. Sure, they managed to take down most of the pack, but Jung-Yum still felt uneasy. At first glance, it looked like not a single wyvern could have withstood that onslaught of shots. While Jung-Yum confirmed that the small ones had been annihilated, the big one's body was nowhere to be found. He was sure that the leader of the pack was still somewhere out there. And he was right. The crafty lizard was hiding right behind the subspace portal. It did not make a sound at all, as if baiting the humans to come out of hiding. Wyvern corpses joined the humans they preyed on in the afterlife. No matter how hard Young-Soo looked around, he could not see the leader of the pack. Jung-Yum devised a plan to confirm their suspicions. Since the wyvern leader might spawn camp them from outside, they can just send a remote-controlled toy as bait first. If there's no reaction, they can finally move comfortably. But if the beast shows up, they have to deal with it decisively, much like a beehive that overwhelms its target. But a remote-controlled toy might not be enough to force the monster to attack. So Jung-Yum proposed a brilliant idea. On top of multiple remote-controlled toy cars, they fastened a mannequin that looked human enough on top. Slowly but surely, they sent the bait out of the portal and into the dark. 2 seconds in, the giant wyvern struck down with brutality, tearing the mannequin dummy into pieces. The plan worked, and they managed to smoke the hidden enemy out. Done with hiding, the beast showed itself before the duo. Its empty and predatory eyes stared deep into their souls. Realizing that it had been tricked to attack a dummy, the beast roared with wrath. Jung-Yum regained his composure and took aim, eager to make the monster eat his bullets. He urged the dazed Young-Soo to do the same, snapping him out of a daze. When the bullet hell restarted, the wyvern took the brunt of the attack at close range. It started falling back bit by bit as the fiery barrage continued. By the time they ceased firing, the air was thick with smoke and the smell of gunpowder. Behind the smolder was a pair of enraged eyes, hell-bent on killing. The wyvern lunged forward to counterattack, ready to tear its enemies apart between its sharp fangs. Unfortunately for the apex predator, no amount of brute force can bypass the portal's security system. After bumping into what seemed like an immovable wall, the wyvern felt odd. The duo was just flabbergasted that the beast was still standing after their concentrated storm of destruction. Can you imagine how thick that monster's hide and scales must be? Jung-Yum recalls hearing Big Boss mention an odd detail about the giant wyvern. His boys tried to attack the pack, but they felt like their attacks were being blocked by an unknown power. That must mean that the beast outside is not deflecting the bullets with just its tough body. It's more like something is blocking their attacks. Infuriated, the apex predator unleashed a guttural war cry, seemingly calling the humans out to play fair. Jongyum responded by throwing a fucking hand grenade. Wyvern looked below and curiously analyzed the green ball rolling on the ground. The young man is down to crash out and find out which is stronger, the monster's defense or humanity's weapons of war. With a limitless supply of weapons and explosives, Jongyum can do this all night long. After the first explosion, multiple ones followed suit, plunging the beast into a painful hell of shrapnel and blasts. Yongsu joined in on the fun, throwing multiple grenades of his own. Without concern for their infinite supplies, the duo exchanged their bullet hell for a more potent and volatile rain of man-made terror. At one point, it looked like they were finally gaining the upper hand and overwhelming the colossal monster. Smoke filled the air, limiting the visibility around the area. Yongsu was spent. He never thought throwing grenades would be such a hard thing to do. Jongyum's shoulders would have been dislocated if they kept on going. Yet after all the effort they put in and all the grenades they heaved, the beast emerged in one piece. It gestured to attack with its claw, but it was actually just trying to tap at the portal's barrier to provoke the duo. It took all those grenades like it was nothing aside from a little bit of its scales peeling off. Just what kind of monster are they really up against? The wyvern finally lost interest in trying to bypass the barrier and turned around. It flew off to the distance, obscured by the thick smog caused by the innumerable explosions. The duo watched and confirmed that the beast was finally gone. But one thing's for sure, that bastard did not leave because their attacks worked. All the explosions left a massive crater on the field, and they could not even make the enemy limp. Anyway, the enemy has retreated for now, and they should get moving too. With Yongsu's driving skills, riding out at night should not be a problem. They chose a small military jeep as a primary vehicle as they traversed the main road. The duo still can't shake the shock of facing that massive wyvern from earlier. Dozens of grenades exploding all at once can only cause some minor scratches. It was a clear and utter failure. They don't have enough firepower. If they happen to encounter an enemy stronger than that wyvern, what kind of weapon can they even use? Grenades are explosives, but they are designed for efficiency in killing humans, making their shrapnel more dangerous than the explosion itself at times. Jongyum considered using weapons with more explosive power, but those things are tricky to utilize freely. If he used a bomb stronger than dozens of grenades, the aftermath would be catastrophic. There is a possibility that innocent people can get caught in the blast if they're near a city. Also, even if the firepower is strong, there is simply no guarantee that one massive bomb would be enough to kill a powerful monster. From someone else's perspective, you'd become the monster. With that being said, Jongyum theorized an ideal weapon. Something as powerful as a bomb without causing collateral damage. Maybe the answer is launching something incredibly heavy or striking them at incredible breakneck speeds. Maybe both. In the end, using guns and grenades is the most realistic option for now. If he can keep upgrading his abilities, he'll eventually become more powerful. Since they just took down a ton of wyverns, Jongyum should have enough magic stones in the bank for some of those juicy upgrades. Much to his surprise, he had a lot more magic stones than he expected. A total of 314 to be exact. They piled up surprisingly fast. He felt the presence of multiple magic stones earlier. Maybe it was because of the big one. In any case, he has enough to splurge on upgrades. Using 25 magic stones, he increased his delivery launch speed from 100 km per hour to 150 km per hour. Another 25 magic stones went to boost his launch preparation time from 5 seconds to just 1. For something a little pricier, 50 magic stones were used to double the simultaneous launch capacity from 2 to 4. For another 25 stones, he also increased the launch range from 25 meters to 50 meters. He basically has a 1-second interval between launching 4 items. The number of magic stones required is astronomical, but the power is undeniable. After his hefty upgrades, he was left with 189 magic stones left in the bank. He had one more upgrade he has been eyeing for a while now. Spending another 50 stones, he finally unlocked the Pocket Dimension Laboratory. He had always wondered what the ability does. He wants to give it a try, but they would have to make a stop first if that's the case. So, he asked Yongsu to pull over to take a short break while they checked on something. Yongsu did not want to slow down or stop the drive as they were near Gangnam at this point. He urged the young man to go ahead and do his thing while he continued to drive. He should be safe since there aren't many monsters around on the road. If Jongyum's really worried, Yongsu proposed that he just open the portal while they keep moving. The young man had never tried it before. After one trial, they found out that opening the portal to his subspace while the vehicle was moving actually worked. If anything happens, Yongsu can just jump into the portal for safety, so there's no need to worry now. Finally assured that old man Yongsu would be fine, the young man entered his new lab. It was a plain room made of uniform white tiles. Nothing seemed special at first glance. It's just a different space after all. Here he can use the Combine to merge more than 2 objects while ignoring their physical condition. He can also separate a single object into its component materials. With Combine, he can register a rifle with its magazine attached as a single item. Separate, on the other hand, would allow him to register a grenade with the safety pin removed. Common sense suggests that the thing would automatically explode if registered like so. But Pax explained that items registered in the pocket dimension exist in digital form while in storage. Unless used or ordered, no physical processes will take place with the item. And so, he registered the grenades with removed safety clips and pins for 15 magic stones. It might not be able to take down something like that giant wyvern, but it's certainly better than nothing. Tinkering and theorizing, he wondered if he should also register a rifle with a pre-attached magazine. It would be convenient if he could combine 2 magazines for uninterrupted firepower. Thinking even deeper, he realized that the lab could be used for something else other than guns and grenades. If he's right, he could actually create a new weapon for himself. The perfect armament to add to his arsenal. Something stronger than a bomb without causing collateral damage to the surroundings. Outside, Young-soo stepped on the brakes upon seeing an odd display on the road. He looked at the crazy display of cars piled on top of one another to form a wall and wondered what the hell it was about. Just in time, Jong-yum came out of the subspace. The drive had been uneventful so far, with no monsters chasing after them, but there was a more pressing problem up front. Somebody deliberately stacked the cars and completely blocked the road off. Breaking through would not be easy. Young-soo had already resigned to their fate to turn around and find another way in, but the young man assured him that it won't be necessary. Actually, the weapon he just crafted would be a perfect answer to this problem. Before Young-soo could ask about what he was talking about, the so-called new weapon had already been deployed. It was multiple barbell plates stacked on top of one another and merged with Combine. With his recent upgrades, Jong-yum can rattle off 4 of these bad boys at once, each of them flying about 150 kilometers per hour. In the face of the supremely heavy amalgamation of metal that would make any gym bro cry, the piled-up cars met their match. Through sheer force, Jong-yum brought down the mysterious wall of vehicles. If someone's trying to block your path, just make one of your own by force. Young-soo was speechless. Jong-yum never fails to shock him time and time again. Looking at the 20-kilogram plates stacked on top of one another, he asked what on earth the young man had created. Some nobodies hiding in a dilapidated building watched in confusion as the wall collapsed before their eyes. From the rubble, the light of the military jeep emerged. Young-soo drove in with speed and outstanding control, shocking the armed guards on the other side. The armed guards in question only had sticks and pipes to defend themselves, so seeing a military vehicle alarmed them. Jong-yum rolled his window down and asked the survivors if his sister, Nurse Kim Joo-yeon, was nearby. A few years ago, the eldest of the Kim siblings was always left to deal with her rowdy sister and brother. She couldn't even focus on her studies for the upcoming exam, but then again, she had never been the studious and responsible type. Kim Sol even worried that Joo-yeon might be sick in the head. Jong-yum asked if they should tell Mom about Joo-yeon's odd behavior out of concern. She usually found it tedious to sit in a chair for more than 30 minutes, so her sudden change worried the whole family. Even Mom chimed in to make sure that her daughter was all right. But the reason she started studying hard was that it was simpler than expected. According to her, she finally found her dream. Because of a little red book called The Apple Tree Story, she found her passion. According to Joo-yeon, even if the world were to end tomorrow, today, she would still treat the sick. Her impassioned speech earned a flabbergasted silence from the audience. The kids reckoned that her bizarre condition seemed to be getting worse. They should ship her ass to the hospital right away. But her determination was not just teenage bravado, not just a phase. Her grades steadily improved and eventually skyrocketed in high school. By graduation, she managed to get accepted into a prestigious nursing school. Fast forward to the present, Nurse Kim Joo-yeon stayed true to her creed. Even if the world has ended, she's still treating and taking care of people. Seeing her little brother in the flesh, her tears started falling as she asked how he made it as far as Gangnam. Jong-yum was practically sobbing like a kid at this point, as he assured his sister that he wasn't hurt. Young-soo was pleased to see the young man finally reach one of his family members. The siblings embraced each other, glad that they defied the odds and stayed alive. After a few minutes of crying and hugging, Jong-yum introduced Young-soo to his sister as a person who helped him a lot in his journey. Ever the most caring big sister, Joo-yeon pulled out a chocolate bar from her pocket, thinking that her little bro must be starving, not knowing that he had access to enough chocolate bars to last a lifetime. But more importantly, they need to tend to a patient. Hearing that her expertise was needed, Joo-yeon immediately demanded to be taken to the patient. Jong-yum cleared up that the victim is in a space only accessible with his ability. Finding out that her little bro has awakened an ability pleasantly surprised her. Since he needs to open a door for the subspace, it would be inconvenient if other people saw the process. Moving secretly outside is impossible. In that case, it might be easier if they just head inside the hospital. Upon entering, Jong Yum immediately caught a bad vibe with all the people living in subpar living conditions. Juyun directed them to the staff room. There, the young man surprised his sister with his absurd ability. Jong Yum promised to explain in more detail later. But for now, the patient is their priority. Finally, they reached the room where the soldier was resting. Juyun performed some preliminary tests to gauge the man's well-being. It hasn't been long since they rescued the soldier on the way to Gangnam. The soldier was beaten and tortured, and his condition was far from good from the start. By conventional means, Han Hyung-ho might not be able to survive. Normally, he would be a lost cause. Fortunately, Kim Ju-yeon had also awakened her own ability as a full-on healer, fitting for her dreams. Her level is still low, so it might take a little bit of time. Furthermore, complete recovery will be hard, but he won't die. Ju-yeon stabilized the patient as much as she could for the day. It was equivalent to basic first aid, but more than the wounds, malnutrition is the bigger problem. Jong-yum brought up her speech about saving lives if the world ended all those years ago, and it made her feel a little embarrassed. He even acted out the scene to mess with her even more. With the patient in stable condition, Ju-yeon demanded to hear her little bro's story thus far. Lee Young-soo's wife made some bread, so it would be perfect to get caught up over some food. Jong-yum gave her everything straight right from the moment he awakened the subspace ability. He told her about how he met Pax, the all-purpose AI assistant. He also talks about how he came across a group of survivors, including Lee Young-soo. Ju-yeon was barely listening to his voice as she was way too focused on the immaculate food on the table. She only listened to the introduction when he was trapped in the logistics center and muted the surroundings from that point. Ju-yeon politely greeted Young-soo's wife. She totally fell in love with the housewife and her cooking. She's a wizard in the kitchen and was even kind enough to set up the staff lounge on the first floor of the logistics center. With beds and furniture set up, they can have a place to rest comfortably. Reminding everyone to get some more food if they want, Young-soo's wife exited the room. Ju-yeon, who did not listen to her little bro's story, asked how Young-soo and his family ended up staying inside the subspace. He refused to repeat his tale. Long story short, he's on a mission to reunite the whole family. With Ju-yeon found, they can now head to Iljiro. Kim Sol is in that city after all. Ju-yeon apologized as she was determined to stay in the hospital. She's badly needed on site as there are more than 300 people gathered in the hospital. There are patients who need constant monitoring and medication. But that's not the real problem, as other nurses can take care of the patients too. The real issue lies deeper in this place. Right now, the man on the highest floor of the hospital is receiving reports of the two men who broke the wall and came in with a military vehicle. They don't know if they're special forces for sure, but they have confirmed that one of them is the younger brother of Kim Ju-yeon. Internal Medicine Department head Jin Seong-hak reckoned that the strangers won't be hostile. He believes that the two probably just needed food and shelter. Since Jin Seong-hak controls every resource in this place, they can control the new arrivals through food rations or through Nurse Ju-yeon. Besides, he is supremely confident that no awakened can possibly be stronger than his #1 henchman. And the veiny hulk of a man concurred. For now, the directive is to act warmly towards the newcomers. Act like they are extending kindness and all that jazz. As for the broken wall, the veiny henchman had already taken care of rebuilding it. He even stacked it higher this time. Back in the subspace, Ju-yeon shared her theory that the survivors are being poisoned, as there are no other feasible explanations for people changing drastically overnight. Department head Jin Seong-hak probably awakened the ability to poison people in some way, gaining control over his victims. Most of the people who were awakened in the hospital were taken over, except Ju-yeon. Those controlled victims are guarding the food and mana stones. Anyway, Ju-yeon had been secretly siphoning off mana stones to strengthen herself. If she can level up more, she might be able to find a cure for the poison. So, she urged her little bro to continue his journey to find Sol and their parents first, while she finds a way to survive on her own. Of course, Jong-yum answered with a simple no. She asserted that this was seriously dangerous, but the young man was stubborn. Since the weapon that Jin Seong-hak uses to control the awakened is delivered through food, the answer is quite simple. Jong-yum can easily take care of the problem with food supplies, and he wants his big sis to take a good look at the true extent of his ability. Since they have no time to waste, it would be better to get started right away. Just as she was about to reprimand him once more, Ju-yeon's mouth hung open in shock at what she saw. Jong-yum opened his portal, and boxes upon boxes of food supplies flooded the room. Jin Seong-hak received an urgent report about Ju-yeon's little brother bringing in some food, but he wasn't impressed. The messenger insisted that the amount was quite substantial, but the bastard remained unfazed. With just 2 people in 1 military vehicle, he doubts that they can bring in so much food. Soon enough, people will steal their food, and once it's all gone, they will come begging for rations like everyone else. Jin Seong-hak reckoned that they should have just hidden their supplies and acted frugally instead of being generous. But this can work in the villain's favor in the end, as it would make things a lot easier than he thought. The messenger added that the newcomers brought in more than the entire hospital had collected so far. The revelation made Jin Seonghak's blood run cold. No matter how you think about it, it should be physically impossible for two people to bring in that much food for everyone. Their scouting team brought in the hospital's current stash. They gathered enough to fill an entire truck. Jin Seonghak considered that they must have the ability to replicate things or to manipulate the size of objects. Whatever it is, they definitely used an ability to secure those supplies, and the hospital needs to bring them into the fold. Jin Seonghak brought out his specialty drug and assigned the assignment of getting Ju-yun's little brother hooked on the drug to his strongest henchman, Song Hyun-gu. If it doesn't work, they can just kill the boy. There's also the other person, the driver. In the middle of the night, Jong-yum distributed food to the inhabitants of the hospital. He's also on a quest to find someone in the crowd. He believes that meeting that person would make things a lot easier. A few minutes earlier, he shared his plan to neutralize all of Jin Seonghak's weapons. They can just dump the poisoned food and replace the supply, subdue the addicted ability users, and as for Jin Seonghak himself, he's not a combat threat at all. He tried to gather as much information as Ju-yun knew. The abilities of the addicted users were mostly useless crap. One can reseal open cans, and another has the ability to do laundry automatically. In general, not many people awaken abilities that are combat-oriented or threatening, except for one person in the hospital. His name is Song Hyun-gu, and one look at him would be enough to feel threatened. After the world turned into this mess, Hyun-gu came all the way to Gangnam from Iljiro, worried about his mother in the hospital. As for his ability, Ju-yun doesn't know much besides his being abnormally strong. The man is so huge that it's hard to miss him. The car wall that protected everyone was built by that meathead using his bare hands. Right now, that monstrosity has finally met Jong-yum for a little one-on-one chat. The young man felt tense, but he actually had some business to settle with the muscle man, so this was perfect. Hyun-gu can't tell what type of business the young man could have with him, but that won't matter anymore. The two came outside, near the car wall that started it all. Muscleman calmly presented Jong-yum with two choices from this point on. One is to willingly drink the medicine right here, right now. The other choice is to refuse and die a painful death. He highly recommended that Jong-yum shouldn't try to run as it would be useless. Now it makes sense why the meathead dragged him to such a sketchy place. Jong-yum wasn't planning to run away in the first place. He'd just get caught if he ran. So, he'd rather go with the secret third option. The option where Song Hyun-gu gets trapped right where he's standing. Angered by his blatant provocation, Hyun-gu lunged forward to grab and crush the young man in his hands. Before he could catch the young man for a beating, his fingertips came into contact with an immovable barrier. Jong-yum was gone, and all he could see was a mysterious portal leading to the logistics center. Confused, Hyun-gu could not make sense of what he was seeing in front of him. When he finally noticed the drone flying in front of him, it was too late. Pax delivered a professional high-spin bowling ball straight to the musclehead's stomach. It knocked the wind out of the beast, as Jong-yum wondered if the 90-km/h fast bowling ball was too much. Nevertheless, he can't afford to show mercy. He apologized and sent another heavy bowling ball straight to the brute's right leg. Just like that, Song Hyun-gu's mobility has been severely limited, as he groaned in pain. He angrily asked what kind of ability Jong-yum was displaying, and he responded by launching one of his barbell plate stacks to the ground. The leg attack took away the giant's mobility, so Jong-yum advised him to stay put. The barbell plate stacks have been slowed down even more, but it's still heavy enough to break bones and take lives if it hits. Song Hyun-gu refused to stay still and charged at one of the stacks, holding it between his arms. He tightened his hold, establishing a firm grasp on the stack. Jong-yum was surprised to see the big man actually making his stacks move. The absolute monster of a man managed to lift the stack out of the ground, ruining Jong-yum's Tetris game. While Hyun-gu was straining himself to lift one of the stacks, he failed to notice that he had already fallen for the metal trap. Jong-yum apologized for making the prison a little cramped and promised that he'd get Muscleman out once everything's sorted out. All he had to do was hang in the middle of the heaviest prison ever conceived for a little bit longer. Jong-yum was on pins and needles, worried that he might seriously hurt the poor big guy. Thank goodness he was so durable. Back inside, Nurse Ju-yeon hurriedly let her brother in. She heard a loud noise outside and was worried that her little bro ran into that muscle man. The young man casually confirmed as if it wasn't a big deal. He pointed outside, letting his sister see where he left the main threat. Ju-yeon peeked and saw the bizarre metal structure and could not believe her eyes. Jong-yum explained that Mr. Song Hyun-gu is his temporary prisoner. With the deadliest threat out of the equation, all they have to do is wait for Yangsu to arrive. Speaking of the devil, the best driver in the East finally showed his face. Getting a clearer view of Yangsu, the siblings were petrified. Mr. Yangsu was limping and clutching his head in pain. He was sweating profusely and complaining about an intense headache pounding in his skull. It was oddly similar to the symptoms of poisoning. The enemy must have gotten hold of Yangsu somehow. The last thing he remembers is handing out food to the survivors and receiving a few words of thanks. Juyun noticed that there was a tiny prickle wound on Youngsu's finger. It must have been the delivery system the bastards used. Someone must have pricked Youngsu's finger with a poisoned apparatus. The culprit must have bumped into him while pretending to say thank you. For now, he needs to get some rest in the subspace. He'll have to be confined for a while. Jongyum did not expect that it would go down like this. He failed to protect his friend. They don't know how the poison works exactly, but if Youngsu is compromised, things will become a lot more complicated. They need to find Jin Seonghak quickly and find the cure. The break room in Sector 1 should suffice as a confinement room. Just in case, they'll have to block the windows and doors. Before Youngsu could even enter the portal, the system detected and blocked the unidentified energy attempting to enter from outside. Since the subspace is the user's independent domain, energy connections from the outside are not possible. Youngsu felt confused as he looked to the young man for answers. The debilitating pain in his head vanished just like that. All he had to do was put a finger in the portal, and the poison was neutralized. To test this hypothesis once more, they experimented with the most prominent poison victim, the imprisoned Song Hyun-gu. Jongyum opened a portal below the veiny muscle man's feet and granted him entry access. Hyun-gu fell into the subspace against his will. The young man quickly unregistered Hyun-gu after cleansing his system of the poison. When he reappeared back in the real world, his complexion looked a lot livelier. There's clarity and realization in his eyes, as if he had just woken up from the longest sleep of his life. He was completely cured and cleansed. The subspace is invulnerable to external attacks, but Jongyum never would have thought that it would block not just physical attacks, but mental ones too. The first thing Song Hyun-gu did after being cured was visit, hug, and apologize to his sick mother after way too long. He urged his mom to rest some more as he had something he needed to do, but he'll be back very soon. His sweet mom might not know what he's going to do, but she pressed him to be careful. Jongyum asked if the big man would be fine on his own, and Hyun-gu assured him that he would be. With his ability, it's impossible to even get scratched by ordinary attacks. Moreover, his memories from his time working under Jin Seonghak are so vivid that he feels ashamed and sorry for everything he's done. It's only fitting that he settles things with that bastard before he goes on with life. He promised to take care of the real cancer in the hospital quickly. Since the big man has the mastermind covered, it's time for Jongyum and the gang to focus on what they need to do. In Jin Seonghak's office, he was notified that a connection with a minion had been lost. He was surprised. He had his suspicions, but the worst-case scenario really happened, and the worst person just walked through the door. Song Hyun-gu's muscles bulged as it took all his willpower not to tear the bastard limb from limb immediately. Jin Seonghak doesn't know how their connection has been severed. But since it has come to this, he only has one thing to say. He smiled like a fucking asshole and asked Hyun-gu to spare him. The big man responded by using his arm as a hammer and the doctor's head as the nail, one tapping the fool to hell. While Mr. Song Hyung-ho left to wrap up things upstairs, the gang was discussing ways to clear the poison addiction of the other survivors in the hospital. Since there's no way of telling who's addicted for certain, it would be safer to just let everyone enter the subspace. It's already late, and some people are having trouble moving. Just putting a finger through the portal should be enough to cure the afflicted. It will be a ton of work, but it's a surefire way to treat everyone. Besides, they have no other options. But right as they braced themselves for an all-nighter, survivors all over the hospital started behaving strangely. Those who were afflicted stood up as though a heavy weight had just been lifted off their shoulders. Every poison survivor was inexplicably cured all at once. Those who were cured realized that they must have been out of their mind all this time. The gang was confused, but the arrival of Song Hyun-gu cleared everything up. His clothes and hands were stained with blood. It was obvious what method he used to settle his unfinished business. He lowered his head and extended his gratitude to Jongyum for saving everyone in the hospital. Jongyum also thanked the big man for eliminating the cause of the problem. He also apologized for firing some bowling balls too hard earlier. Thankfully, Hyun-gu was so durable that he only sustained some light bruising. His bones were miraculously fine. The big man had seen many monsters and strange phenomena since the apocalypse started, but seeing those plates fall from the sky to imprison him was truly bizarre. Even monsters can't compare with how fearsome Jongyum's ability truly is. When asked if he was planning to stay at the hospital, Jongyum was taken aback. Hyun-gu realizes that it may be selfish of him to ask for more help after all the young man has done, but the hospital would be safer with Jongyum around. While he understands, Jongyum is still on a mission to find the rest of his family, and they'll have to leave soon. Hyun-gu did not insist any further and wished him luck in reuniting with all his family safely. Since they're on the topic of family, Hyung-hoo came from Yeoljiro, so this is a valuable chance to ask about the situation in the city. The big man was shocked to hear that the gang was heading to Yeoljiro since it was impossible to reach that place now. A few hours later, a new dawn shined on the hospital and the survivors. Jongyum not only provided them with plenty of food to last a long time, but he also gave them valuable supplies like clothes and tools. The former enemies shook hands with mutual respect for one another as the big man swore to repay Jongyum's kindness. Finally, the gang left the hospital and drove towards Iljiro. Mr. Yongsu is back in tip-top shape as he drives flawlessly. He asked Jongyum about the wall around Iljiro that Hyungu mentioned, and theorized that it must be some kind of ability. If it is, the young man is banking on at least communicating with whoever put it up. Otherwise, they won't have a way to get past it. Last night, Hyungu gave them the rundown of what happened to Iljiro as he was leaving. It sounds absurd to even describe what he saw, but a wall really grew around the city. It sprouted from the ground like a tooth emerging. He didn't know the wall's exact size since he escaped as it was growing, but by now, he estimated that it should be as tall as an average skyscraper. That means ground travel is practically impossible. Breaking the wall might be an option, but it's uncertain. There's also something else that surprised Hyungu in that city. The types of monsters roaming Iljiro and Gangnam are a bit different. That place is mostly filled with skeletons. It would be more accurate to call them undead, as they kept coming back to life even after being killed. So, seeing corpses walking around the city was commonplace. Iljiro has monsters that don't die, and a massive wall to keep everyone out. It seems like a troublesome place in many ways. But Jongyum felt as though he did not need to worry about his sister, Seol, trapped in there. Rather, he feels like she would beat monsters even without awakening any power. From inside the subspace, he received a call from Ju-yeon, who finally agreed to tag along after the hospital was freed from the poison. He lazily asked why she called, and Big Sis immediately scolded him to fix his attitude. It turns out that the soldier he saves has finally regained consciousness. Jongyum hurriedly went into the subspace, and the soldier sincerely thanked the young man for saving his life. He introduced himself as Colonel Han Hyung-ho from the 50th Intelligence Communications Battalion. Thanks to Ju-yeon's diligent treatment, the colonel has recovered perfectly. Confused, the colonel asked where they were. He could see the military command outside, but the rest of the area was unfamiliar to him. There shouldn't be any buildings around the command, let alone a logistics center. Jongyum revealed that they were in the staff lounge of PAX FC Logistics Center inside his subspace. Outside, they're currently in Gangnam, heading toward Hanam Bridge. The newly recovered colonel had a hard time processing everything he had just heard. Ju-yeon simplified that they're inside the kid's ability in Gangnam. Upon hearing where he was, the colonel humbly requested to be let off on the road. Jongyum hurriedly assured the man that they had no intention of harming Mr. Han or anything like that. The colonel already knew that the gang was not a threat, as they were kind enough to save him from the brink of death. He can't tell them the exact reason, but he has a mission to reach the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the nation as quickly as possible. Jongyum understands that it must be a matter of national significance, so he called on Pax. Instead of letting the colonel off like he requested, the young man ordered his secret weapon, banana milk, and a sandwich. While he agrees to let Mr. Han off, he won't let the man go so easily. He handed the food to the starving soldier and asked for more details about his mission. The colonel resisted the temptation of food even though it's been ages since he had a decent meal. When Jongyum busted out the big guns, pizza, waffles, chicken, and all kinds of delectable dishes, it was game over. Mr. Han started spilling government secrets as he shoved food into his gullet. It all started one day when creatures from the other world started appearing all over the world simultaneously. By creatures from the other world, he means more than just monsters. Insects, animals, plants, and even geographical features like mountains appeared all over the globe. These creatures attacked and tore everything they saw. Humans, animals, and even each other. They spared nothing and no one. With the emergence of these monsters, the government began recruiting the so-called awakened and formed a new unit with the recruits. They effectively handled the monsters with their otherworldly abilities. Mr. Han's unit was stationed near Gwacheon and Anyang, and it was stable for the most part. Things were going swimmingly until that beast appeared. He saw his men get slaughtered and eaten by the giant wyvern. Guns, grenades, and even shells were wholly ineffective against the behemoth. They repeatedly requested support from nearby military units, but everyone else was on the brink of destruction at the hands of other powerful monsters. The strange thing was they could contact Gwacheon and Anyang during battles, but not even a sighting report came from the command. In the end, Colonel Han had to make the judgment call to retreat unless they wanted to get wiped out by the wyverns. They set eyes on the National Communication Command. As the monsters relentlessly pursued what remained of his unit, many of his comrades died. When they reached a city, they tried to recruit some awakened people to bolster their forces as they advanced. After many days of travel, they finally reached the base camp. As he expected, the place was already deserted when they arrived. The reason became clear soon enough. While searching through the command, they found some dubious documents. In those papers, the word coup was written and mentioned. A rebellion is underway. After that, Colonel Han tried his best to reach the Joint Chiefs of Staff, but the pesky wyvern trapped them in the base camp. To make matters worse, the recruited awakened killed every soldier and took over. Those were the gangsters eaten by the wyverns. The First Corps is likely stifling government efforts to gather troops, and the command's commander has sided with them. A rebellion in the midst of the apocalypse isn't even surprising anymore. Since the gang is headed for Iljiro, Jongyum promises to drop the colonel off as they cross the Han River Bridge. The colonel thanked them for their consideration as he continued munching on the gourmet meal on the table. Jongyum told Yongsu to start driving a little faster but not at maximum speed, even though the situation was time-sensitive. Now that he's thinking about it, Colonel Han reckoned that the young man must have encountered the wyvern in the military base too. Just as he was wondering how Jongyum managed to shake the persistent beast off, his eyes darted wide open in shock. He saw a fearsome ogre desperately trying to break through the portal's barrier, while Jongyum and Yongsu seemed unfazed. While the colonel was crapping his pants in fear, everyone else acted like it was just an average Tuesday. Suddenly, he saw a stack of heavy barbell plates fly toward the ogre, sending the poor beast flying to the heavens like a lifeless rag doll. Colonel Han watched in horror as the barbell disc stack spilled monster blood on the streets. Meanwhile, Jongyum and Yongsu remained nonchalant. They had long since become accustomed to such absurdity. The colonel, on the other hand, had stopped chewing his food in shock. When Jongyum deployed the military vehicle, poor Colonel Han almost choked right then and there. The dynamic duo went out of the subspace, and the young man just told Colonel Han to continue eating and resting like a good boy. They weren't far from the next destination, but Jongyum would gladly leave the portal open so Mr. Han could monitor the situation on the road. Launching pillars of discs at breakneck speeds and summoning military vehicles out of thin air is definitely an overpowered ability. The ogres that posed many headaches before were now simple trash mobs to kill in one shot. All Jongyum had to do was launch his thick stacks, and the monsters were crushed. Colonel Han was so enamored by the sight of the ogre slaughter that he had to take a closer look outside. He watched as each of the slain ogre's magic stones got sucked up into the subspace efficiently. The colonel doubted his eyes earlier, thinking that he must have been seeing things, but it was really happening. He saw it clearly. Those portals were sending heavy objects at high speeds to send the monsters to the afterlife. Enemies were falling at the rate of 4 per second, and those stacks could freely change direction too. Moreover, the collection of magic stones had been made infinitely more convenient with the simple automated extraction and retrieval. Everyone with eyes and a brain could tell that the subspace was an insanely broken ability if utilized like this. After a while, the crew arrived at Bampo Bridge. Unfortunately for them, the bridge had been destroyed by God knows what. Jongyum apologized to the colonel as their estimated time of arrival had just increased slightly, since they would need to find an alternative route. The colonel was just thankful they were helping him in the first place, and while they searched for another route, he'd just go back inside the subspace. Jongyum apologized for the delay, but it was already absurd that they reached Bampo Bridge from Gangnam in 1 hour. Considering the detour due to the collapsed road and the pesky monsters along the way, it was an insanely short amount of travel time. While the miracle of this 1-hour ride was partly thanks to Jongyum's ability, the one in the driver's seat deserved the most credit. Yongsu might look like a goof at times, but his skillful driving was the real deal. Just watching it from the passenger seat was dizzying. When the colonel first saw it, he was so startled that he nearly threw up in the back seat. He quickly learned that staying inside the comfort of the subspace would protect him from severe motion sickness. His assessment of Jongyum and Yongsu was stellar. Both were remarkable talents. After more driving and more monster clearing, the crew found themselves near another bridge. It looked like it was in poor condition, but at least it was still in one piece. Yongsu reckoned that he could drive through the whole length, but Jongyum was a little hesitant. The young man spotted some suspicious silhouettes from afar, which made him wary. Upon closer inspection, he spotted what looked like a fortress wall. It must be the rumored barrier of Yuljiro they'd heard about. With its size, there was no way they could get through it with a car. Since they were too far to say for sure that they couldn't break through, the wisest thing to do now was to go closer and see. If they passed through the bridge, they'd pass Yongsan as well. In that case, they could drop Colonel Han off since it was on the way. After a few more minutes of uneventful driving, they arrived at the colonel's drop-off point. He thanked the duo for escorting him safely all the way, even though they didn't have to. Jongyum wished the military man good luck with his urgent business, and they said their goodbyes. Now the only remaining task was to find a way inside Iljiro to find his little sister. Earlier, the fortress wall had looked higher and sturdier than he had expected. Maybe leveling up enough to put the whole wall into the subspace could be a viable strategy if push came to shove. Unfortunately, he was still a long way off from the next level up. He could upgrade his tracking delivery enhancement to stage 2 using 50 magic stones, and with 400 stones collected per hour, he could probably grind for 2 more hours for a subspace level up. Colonel Han debated for a second and eventually proposed that Yongsu and Jongyum join him. The government was providing support like mana stones to help initial growth for awakened people, and he reckoned that the subsidy would help the duo a lot. especially given how talented they were. The two would be guaranteed substantial support. While Jung-yum truly appreciated the offer, he was still on a mission to find his family, and family came first and foremost. As for the promised magic stones, they could just gather those along the way. The young man had no problem hunting down hordes of monsters after all. The colonel was dispirited. He knew that what Jung-yum said made sense. But if it was the Joint Chiefs of Staff headquarters, maybe he'd reconsider. He reckoned that the HQ must have a helicopter or two he could use. Colonel Han answered that they probably did have some helicopters lying around. Meanwhile, the HQ was abuzz with reports of Guachen and Anyang being destroyed. Even the 56th Division had been decimated. The only place remaining with somewhat intact forces might be the First Corps. Given the state of things, could a governing body still exist? All surviving military forces out there were truly in the dark. The director's pessimistic musings were interrupted by another messenger. Mr. Messenger came to inform the director that someone was here to see him. The commander of the 50th Battalion of the National Communications Agency, Colonel Han, had given his statement about how his entire unit was killed, and he made it all the way to the HQ with a message that he insisted must reach the director personally. Hearing the 50th Signal Battalion mentioned shocked the director to his core. Finally, Colonel Han was ushered into the room and delivered the most stalwart salute of his life. He recounted everything that had happened without omitting a single detail. And to cap the crucial report off, he handed the director a piece of paper. Written in the document was blatant evidence of rebellion involving the First Corps. Reading through the document made the director's stomach drop. He had been completely clueless about the undercurrents happening in the middle of this chaotic period. But now that he had been enlightened, he looked outside towards the men who had kept Colonel Han safe to deliver the crucial intel. The director and the colonel rushed down to thank Jung-yum and Young-soo for all the help they'd provided, praising the duo for the tremendous service they'd done for the country. Director had also heard about Jung-yum's abilities and his request for a helicopter in exchange for supplies. Helicopters were important strategic assets nowadays, but the director was willing to let go and deliver one for the young man. However, there was a condition he had to abide by. They would like to formally invite Jung-yum as an awakened member of the military. As everyone was aware, the government was struggling to stabilize the current situation. But if the young man joined forces with the military, they might find an unexpected breakthrough. Jung-yum apologized and reiterated that right now, there was nothing more important than rescuing his family. While it was unfortunate, the military couldn't just force him to join and forget about his mission. But in that case, the director couldn't let go of their helicopters. Ever the reasonable man, Jung-yum understood that it couldn't be helped. He wished the director luck in stabilizing the situation soon so everyone could return to a normal life. He gave a proper and respectful goodbye before hopping in his vehicle. The director was puzzled. He misplayed his hand so badly. He thought the young man would eventually cave. Unfortunately for these fools, Jung-yum was not out of choices yet. If the plan to cross the wall with a helicopter didn't pan out, he'd just find another way. Since he hadn't even properly checked the fortress wall himself, he was hopeful that he'd get through somehow. With the first offer failing, the director had to swallow his pride and knock on Jung-yum's window to extend one more request. If the young man could fulfill the request, the military promised to provide the helicopter he wanted. Jung-yum accepted, and a whole battalion was mobilized at once, with military trucks and vehicles lined up in single file. The young man found himself in the vanguard, sipping on his juice box as if he wasn't heading for war. He seemed bored out of his mind in the passenger seat. Moments ago, the director laid out the request about Seoul Station, the last place they assembled reserve-awakened individuals. Currently, the base camp can still communicate smoothly with the survivors at that location. The problem was that skeletons had clogged and blocked the road in between. Those skeletons weren't particularly threatening in terms of combat power. However, they were a nuisance in various other ways. Not only were there so many of them, but they were also tricky opponents. They possessed a core in the bottom part of the last right rib. If you failed to break that core in time, they'd just revive themselves endlessly. In short, Jung-yum's role was to break through the hordes of skeletons and rescue the isolated awakened ones. And he was doing that pretty handily with his flying barbell disc stacks. The mission sounded simple enough for him after all. For the soldiers who were seeing his abilities in action for the first time, they could not believe their eyes. The operation the soldiers had been dreading for a while now was easily steamrolled by some random kid with a bizarre ability. They eventually reached Seoul Station, and the awakened survivors cheered at the sight of their rescue team. The military moved quickly and led the survivors to the armored trucks. After everyone was accounted for, the director gave Young-soo and Jung-yum the go-ahead to depart. The trucks carrying the survivors peacefully departed without any resistance. With Jung-yum's ability, the skeletons were a breeze to handle. The poor soldiers had to fight those things with guns, requiring insane precision to destroy the core. However, there was another thing the young man should know about. There was something on these roads that was rarely seen. Among the skeletons, there was one that was on a completely different level. The military dubbed that thing the Skeleton Knight. The general directive in case of encountering the monster during a mission by any chance was to avoid engaging at all costs. Even if they needed to take some damage, every unit had to retreat immediately, for the monster was indestructible. As usual, Jung-yum opened his portal and sent another disc stack flying at breakneck speeds. It was time to test if the Skeleton Knight really was invincible. The survivors of Seoul Station curiously watched the action from a safe distance, curious to see Jung-yum's abilities. Even the soldiers could not take their eyes away from the spectacle ahead. Meanwhile, Jung-yum and Young-soo are starting to get worried about the enemy standing in front of their car. The Skeleton Knight just stood in the middle of the road menacingly, its piercing gaze fixed on the military convoy. Much to everyone's surprise, the monster started speaking in an unknown language. It sounded like gibberish to them, but it was definitely speaking and trying to say something. Finally, the Skeleton Knight lodged its sword on the ground and took out a magic stone from its pocket. It slowly crushed the stone in its hand, sprinkling the magic dust on the floor. After that, the Skeleton Knight magically started speaking human tongue, extending his greetings to the humans, calling them Otherworlders. He introduced himself as Sir Gawain, one of the 12 knights serving the Night King. However, Jung-yum was more curious about that magic stone trick than the knight who had done it. It seems like magic stones can be used for other purposes. Gawain admitted that hurling hunks of steel towards him without warning was quite an interesting greeting, and asked if Jung-yum was a mage. He also asked why the young man was interfering in a skeleton territory. While Gawain understands human impatience, given that the world is in the early days of the pioneering phase, he argued that business ethics must be upheld in negotiations between two parties. As a response to the Skeleton Knight's reasonable argument, Jung-yum hurled another disc stack, which Gawain quickly slashed in half, reacting at lightning speed. He tried to tell Jung-yum that these attacks were useless. Such weak spells wouldn't even do so much as leave a scratch on his armor. But Jung-yum did not listen. Instead, he continued launching more hunks of steel. Gawain skillfully maneuvered his skeletal body around the attack, dodging with a perfectly timed roll. He stabbed his sword into the ground to regain a foothold, sending a counterattack in the process. The Skeleton Knight was pissed that the human's answer was unadulterated violence. Like the real Sigma that he is, Jung-yum sent 4 more barbell plate stacks flying toward the poor Skeleton Knight. Gawain expertly parried the first one to arrive with his shield. He used his agility to dodge the next one and slashed the rest of the plates down, killing their momentum. The series of expertly timed dodges and attacks brought the Skeleton Knight dangerously close to the convoy. Young-soo saw the menacing monster running at them at full speed and started panicking. Jung-yum was just impressed that the thing in front of them could slice through 500 kilograms of steel like it's tofu. However, he can see that the Skeleton Knight is wary of getting hit, careful not to take any direct damage. If Jung-yum can land some attacks, they should be golden. In that case, he bit his tongue and spent 50 magic stones unlocking tracking delivery for more accurate shots. As a test run, he launched 1 stack aiming for the Skeleton Knight's chest. The hunk of steel flew out of the portal like a giant speeding bullet. Gawain insulted him for trying the same trick over and over again, calling Jung-yum stupid for a mage's standard. While he was boasting that he could dodge these stacks no matter how many were thrown, he was shocked to see the giant bullet shift courses in midair. Instead of the usual single-minded attack, this one actually homed in on the Skeleton Knight's chest, just as Jung-yum ordered. Nevertheless, Gawain was able to tank the direct damage with his armor, parrying the stack away after being hit by the initial momentum. He warned the young man not to get so cocky, for he just let his guard down for a brief moment, and it won't happen again. But as soon as he lifted his head, a bowling ball knocked it back down to the ground. As usual, Gawain quickly recovered from the crash and lifted his head back once more. He could not see the ball at all, and it made him feel fear for the first time in a long time. The fear paralyzed the Skeleton Knight for a second, leaving another opening for another bowling ball traveling at breakneck speeds. This one hit the monster precisely in the skull. Jung-yum did not let up. He continued launching bowling balls one after another. Inside the car, he was chanting left head, back head, front head, crown, right head, crown, back of the head, left head, front, and many more random directions like he was inputting a cheat code. With everything pre-aimed, he executed the auto-ship order. While the enemy was struggling with an endless barrage of bowling balls, Jung-yum's jaw was hurting from blurting out all the commands at once. Thankfully for them, physical impacts still work, even though the skeleton was incredibly tough. With auto-shipment, they can at least breathe a little easier now. But the young man believes that they are not out of the woods just yet. That Skeleton Knight's armor is troublesome. It's much tougher than even the giant wyvern's scales. Moreover, Gawain is wielding a sword and shield with unparalleled skill. Considering all those factors, the Skeleton Knight is more threatening than a giant wyvern. That only made the bowling ball torture more brutal, though. Seeing the cracks forming on Gawain's entire skeletal body, Jung-yum reckoned that they should send the rest of the military away while the enemy was still disoriented just to be safe. Thankfully, it seems like they don't have to do anything else, as Gawain's cursing turned to a pleading to stop the bowling ball barrage. Yongsoo can clearly see more and more skeleton fragments flying off in every direction. Seizing the moment, Jung-yum ordered more shipments of disc pillars to simultaneously hit from the left, right, front, and back. The 4 heavy-hitting stacks spelled the end of the formidable skeleton knight. Poor guy got his skull smashed without even getting to show off his skills in proper close combat. But even in his last moments, Gawain stayed classy and praised Jung-yum for being an impressive mage. Then he warned the humans that this is not the end. Far from it, for skeleton knights do not die, and even in death, everything they do and everything that they are is in service of the Night King. 3 shards of concentrated magic dropped from the kill, 2 big blue stones and 1 small red shard. Jung-yum hurriedly retrieved the drops right into his portal. The system informed him that those were 2 large mana stone fragments and a reinforcement stone. The soldiers stuck behind the convoy could not believe what they just saw. That young man leading the pack just took down the skeleton knight that has been giving them a headache for a long time now. The skeleton knight, who did not even flinch when hit by tank shells, was done in by a bunch of barbell disc stacks and bowling balls. At the back, the survivors started happily chanting Jung-yum's name for slaying the unkillable skeleton knight. Overcoming such a foe warrants a celebration. Upon arrival back in the HQ, the director got a rundown of everything that transpired and was astonished. He told the young man to retreat immediately if they ever encountered the harrowing skeleton knight, but that directive was clearly ignored. With that being said, defeating one is a better outcome than the director could have ever hoped for. This won't do. The military desperately needs both Jung-yum and Yongsoo in their ranks. Mr. Director is done playing games. He's practically begging the duo to join their cause. Unfortunately for the country's remaining military forces, Jung-yum cannot be swayed away from his quest to find the rest of his family. Thankfully, the director was a level-headed guy and backed down. But the offer still stands. He hopes that once Jung-yum finishes reuniting with his family members, the young man would give the military's offer another serious thought. Right now, the armed forces already consider the young man an invaluable ally to the country. For now, it's time for the director to fulfill his end of the bargain and get the young man the helicopter that was promised as reward. Jung-yum doesn't necessarily enjoy the high expectations being put on him, as it's just another added pressure, but he gets where they are coming from. He just finished taking down an unkillable and troublesome skeleton knight after all. Truthfully, he barely managed to pull the wind out of his ass. If there had been even one more enemy with a similar skill level to Gawain, they would have been cooked. Without a doubt, this rescue mission would have ended in a catastrophic failure. But the biggest issue here is that there are at least 11 more skeleton knights like Gawain out there. He called himself one of the 12 knights after all. There's also the ominous warning that skeleton knights never die, even in death. Jung-yum reckoned that the Night King must be even stronger. It's time to reconsider his arsenal. Even the high-caliber rounds of pillar stacks he prepared barely did any damage. The bowling balls, on the other hand, were able to crack the tough armor. While it doesn't make sense logically, monsters in the world as a whole has stopped making sense to begin with. On the way up to the helipad, the director asked if the young man is really headed for Iljiro. As everyone can see from the HQ, high walls have risen up around Iljiro. The headquarters had already sent a unit to investigate the nature of these bizarre walls. Unfortunately, they've long since lost contact with the unit. Since then, they've been conducting aerial reconnaissance of the area inside the walls whenever possible. Through those expeditions, they have confirmed that there are still people active inside. The director believes that his troops must be safe inside the walls, and so is Jung-yum's family. The young man appreciated his hopeful sentiments. Jung-yum actually forgot that his sister could be in danger. If he's honest, he wasn't even worried about her. That girl is more of a monster than anything that he has ever encountered since the apocalypse started. Mr. Director also shared something peculiar they've noticed recently. The upper part of the wall seems to be gradually growing and curving inward as if it's forming a roof. They don't have an estimated time until it's completely closed off, but he's glad that they can lend Jung-yum a helicopter before it does. Finally, after a long walk all the way to the top, the group reached the helipad. Jung-yum laid his eyes upon a raggedy-looking helicopter that looked like it had just been shot down out of the skies. Did he go through the trouble of running an errand for the military for something so shitty? He tried to convince himself that this should be fine. Even though it looks outdated, he just needs something that can fly over the wall. Thankfully, the director redirected his attention to the other side of the rooftop. The helicopter Jung-yum will be riding on is parked on the other end. Finally, he laid his eyes upon a pristine and badass-looking chopper glimmering as it reflected the light from the sunset. Both Jung-yum and Yongsoo were speechless, and Mr. Director smugly smiled as he could finally prove that he was useful too. Yongsoo started laughing excitedly. His aviator glasses and Top Gun jacket finally found a fitting vehicle to be in.